Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Changed the Fate of Nemu and Isane Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto, you can't let him have it. The sun rose high above the Soul Society. Everyone was going about their daily business. The Shinigami watched over this spiritual world, protecting them from within the Seireitai. They were broken up into 13 guard squads that made up the Shinigami forces. It had been a year since Ichigo Kurosaki defeated Sosuke Azien in battle and lost his Shinigami powers. Everyone was grateful for his help with that incident, but life had returned to normal. One person was walking silently toward the barrack of Squad 12. She wore a short form-fitting kimono, with a white nagahugan underneath. Wrapped around her waist was a white obi, fastened with a red cord. She had piercing green eyes and silk-like black hair that was tied in a braid. This was Nemu Kuretsuchi, lieutenant of Squad 12. She was on her way to see her father, creator Mayuri Kuretsuchi, the captain of Squad 12. He had sent a hell butterfly to her, ordering her to come to the lab as soon as possible. She walked at a quick pace, hoping to get there soon, to avoid her father's anger. As she walked, she didn't notice someone turn the corner until she ran into them. Both fell hard to the ground and Nemu was the first to look up. She looked and saw that it was the lieutenant of Squad 4, Isane Katetsu. Isane was a tall woman with gray eyes, silver hair, and two small braids on her right side. She wore the standard Shinigami uniform and was slowly getting up off the floor. "I'm sorry, Nemu," Isane said and helped the other girl up. "Captain Unohana needs me as quickly as possible, and I wasn't watching where I was going." Nemu looked at Isane and nodded. "I understand, I too am in a hurry to see my captain." Isane nodded and went on her way. "I'll see you later," she called and disappeared around a corner. Nemu watched this and sighed, again heading toward her barracks and an angry captain. It was a beautiful day in Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. It had been 3 years since the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi War and the village was thriving. They had defeated Madara Uchiha and his armies, restoring peace to the land, but it was not a lasting peace. Soon all the villages were once again at fighting each other. This was the current dilemma of the Godime Hokage, Suon Senju, was facing. She looked at the stack of paperwork before her and cried inwardly. "Why do I have to do this?" she thought to herself as she continued to work. To her, every time she seemed to finish one stack, another one would suddenly appear to take its place. She was going insane. She missed her carefree life of gambling and drinking, but alas, she had a job to do. Yet this didn't stop her from sneaking a quick glance at her secret stash of sake in one of her desk drawers. She looked around, quickly making sure the cost was clear, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a bottle. She smiled to herself as she poured herself a glass. Suddenly a large orange and yellow blur came through the window, causing Tsunade to spill her sake. "My sake!" she cried, as she looked down at the spilt drink. She looked up at the person who had burst through her window. Standing in front of her was a tall man, about 6 feet 2, with long spiky blonde hair tied in a ponytail. He was wearing a black shirt, with a jonin vest over it. He had black pants with orange strips down the sides. His coat had orange flames at the bottom and the kanji for fox on the back. He had dark blue eyes with 3 whiskers-like marks on his cheeks, making him look feral. This was Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the war, and Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. "Hi Ba-chan," he said cheerfully. Tsunade looked at her son, with a sigh. She got up and punched him across the room. "What have I told you about that?" she yelled at him. "I said call me Ka-san." "Sorry Ka-san," he said, as he limped over to her. "I just couldn't resist." "Sure you couldn't," she chided him, and gave him a motherly smile. "So what brings you here today?" Naruto gave her a big smile and said, I was bored and was wondering if you had any missions I could do. Tsunade knew there was something up. Naruto was asking to do work. Mostly he would try to worm his way out of D or C rank missions, which was all she had. You want to do a mission? Does it matter what rank? She asked, hoping to get more information out of him. Not really, he said with a smile. What happened? She asked him bluntly. What are you talking about? He said, trying to get her off the subject. You never want to do low-ranking missions, she said, making him mentally slap himself. So, you are either really bored, or you did something you want to get away from, and I have a feeling it's the second one. Naruto looked at his adopted mother and sighed. Can't get anything past you, can I? He said with a sigh. Pretty much, she said with a smile. So, spill. Naruto looked at her and sighed. Well, I kind of ruined Sasuke and Sakura's date, while I was training, by accidentally destroying the restaurant they were in. That's why you're trying to get a mission, she said, thinking he was just being paranoid. This is Sakura we're talking about, Naruto said, starting to get scared. She has been waiting to go on a date with Sasuke for years, and I ruined it. Tsunade got the picture and knew he was as good as dead. She gave him a smile and started to look at the mission scrolls. Let's see what we can find. SB. Nemu stepped into the lab, stood by the monitors, and watched as her father worked around a new machine he had made. He turned and saw her standing there. There you are, you stupid girl. He walked over to her and slapped her across the face. You are supposed to be here as soon as I call you. Is that clear? Yes, father, she said, looking at the ground. She hated when she made him mad. It seemed like everything she did was not good enough. Mayuri looked at his daughter. Let's get on with it, leading her toward the machine he was operating earlier. Nemu followed and wondered what he was going to show her. As they reached the machine, she noticed that it was large with many tubes coming from it. It had a large screen that showed a forest. What is this? She asked as she looked at the machine. This, my failed experiment, is a window into a world that we have never seen, he explained with pride. You mean there is a world we don't know about? She said with shock. It'd been said that there were only the 3 worlds, and now with this discovery, it shattered that notion completely. Mayuri looked at Nemu's shocked face and smiled. Yes, with this we can view this other world and see what has been going on. Just think of the test subjects, and other things we can learn from that world. Nemu just nodded and watched her father rant about this discovery. She wondered if this world had people on it, or was it inhabited by something that was a threat to the Soul Society. Have you reported this to the head captain? She asked quietly. Why would I report this to that buffoon? Mayuri stated obviously. Nemu thought for a moment before answering. He could authorize an expedition to that world, she suggested. Mayuri looked at her and slapped her across the face. Why didn't you mention this earlier, you stupid girl? I'm sorry, she said, focusing on the ground once again. Don't dwell on it, you idiot, he said. Go send the message so I can get my work done. Yes, father, she said and headed out the room. Later in captain meeting. So, I feel it would be very informative if we sent a team to this world and see what they have to offer us, Mayuri stated to the other captains, hoping they would approve of the plan. So, you're telling us, there is another world we have no knowledge of and you want to go and explore it? Said Toshiro Hitsugaya, captain of Squad 10. Exactly, Mayuri stated. Are you out of your mind? Hitsugaya said angrily. We are still recovering from the war and you want us to waste precious manpower to visit a world that might be hostile to us. But wouldn't it be a good idea for us to learn about this world, so we can be prepared if they ever attack? Said Retsu Unohana, captain of Squad 4. It is always best to know your enemy. Soon a huge argument broke out between the captains. Some wanted to explore this new place while others wanted to leave it alone. Head Captain Yamamoto looked at the bickering captains and slammed his cane down, causing everyone to go silent. Enough of this foolishness, he stated. I have to agree with Captain Kuratsuchi. I think it would be in the best interest of the Soul Society to learn of this new place, and to see if Hollow are there as well. Mayuri smiled and was about to speak, when he was cut off by the head captain. But, we will be sending only a pair, so as not to waste any forces. They must be, at least, lieutenants. I will send Nemu, Mayuri stated as if it was the easiest answer. She knows what information to gather, and she can get it quickly. Many of the other captains were nervous about sending their lieutenants to this new world. Mayuri knew, if no one stepped up, they would go. I will send Isane, Captain Unohana said finally, much to the surprise of the other captains. Retsu, are you sure that is wise? Asked Jishiro Yukitaki, captain of Squad 13. Yes, it is best to have a healer in the group, in case things turn hostile, Unohana stated. Everyone nodded in agreement. So, it is settled then, Captain Yamamoto said. Lieutenants, Isane Katetsu and Nemu Kuretsuchi, will travel to this new world and gather intel on its inhabitants and Hollow activity. Dismissed. SB. Naruto looked at the mission scroll and sighed. It was a simple bandit raid mission. He was to head to a town on the edge of the Land of Fire, near the border of the Land of Winds. They were having trouble with a large group of bandits stealing their food and taking their women as slaves. Naruto knew it was just a C rank. He wished she had at least a B rank mission, but then again, beggars can't be choosers. As he approached the village, he heard someone scream. He picked up the pace and raced toward the village. As it came into view, he saw the bandits, raiding. He quickly pulled out a three-pronged kunai and threw it into the middle of the village. As soon as the kunai landed, he disappeared in a yellow flash. A bandit was having the time of his life. They were raiding the village again and he was about to get the one girl he had had his eye on since they had first arrived. As he was about to have his fun, he watched as a strange-looking kunai fell out of the sky and hit the ground. He stared at it for a moment, when suddenly a yellow flash appeared. He suddenly felt a blade of cold steel go into his body. The young girl looked up and saw a tall man with long spiked blonde hair standing over her. He put his fingers to his mouth telling her to stay quiet and pointed toward one of the houses where she could hide. She smiled and nodded, quickly running to the house. Naruto watched and made sure she was at the house before disappearing in a yellow flash. Soon, the cries of dying bandits filled the air as Naruto hunted them down, slaying them mercilessly. Soon only one bandit remained. He looked all around for the attacker but saw nothing. Show yourself, he shouted, his legs trembling. He soon heard a laugh filled the air. I am everywhere, the voice said, causing the bandit to shake with fear. I'm not scared of you, he stammered, only to hear the laugh again. You will be, it said as he felt a blade against his neck. So, now, what you can tell me about the other bandits? Naruto asked. SB. Nemu and Isane stood next to each other with their things packed. They were nervously waiting on Mayuri to open a portal to this new world. They wondered what was on the other side and what type of people or things lived there. So, Nemu, are you ready for this? Isane asked with a nervous smile. I am, she said flatly, not wanting to look weak in front of her father. I will explore as ordered. Yeah, Isane said and turned to watch Mayuri work. Mayuri was standing in front of the viewing machine before turning toward the two girls. We are almost ready, he stated, handing them two modified lieutenants' badges. These will be your homing signals in case something goes wrong. Just put some rice into them and we will hone in on your positions. Both girls nodded and he continued. You need to first find a settlement and observe the people. Next, find out if they have any type of powers at all, and lastly, see if there is any hollow activity there. Yes, Captain, they said in unison and Mayuri smiled. Now, let's get this show on the road, he stated, pressing a button that started the machine. Soon, a loud sound filled the room. A senkiman, with black and white doors, opened up for them. I wish you good researching, he said, as he watched the girls enter the door. The trip through the Senkimen was different, to say the least. Once they stepped through, they found themselves surrounded by trees. Nemu looked around and saw the sun bearing down on them. Isane looked and saw, running around, many animals that she recognized. Let's get moving, Nemu commanded, leading the way. Isane followed and soon they found a road. Well, this is convenient, Isane muttered. Nemu nodded in agreement. This makes things easier, she said to Isane, as they headed down the road. Soon a town came into view and they observed many humans walking around. They then noticed that many of the people were looking at them as well. Is it just me, or do they see us? Isane said to her companion. It seems that way, Nemu replied. But, let's test that theory. They walked toward one of the street vendors and waited to see if the vendor responded. He looked at them with a smile. What can I get you this fine day, ladies? He greeted. You can see us? Nemu asked. The vendor looked at them as if they were crazy. Of course, who won't notice two pretty lasses, he said with a confused look on his face. He quickly grabbed Isane's hand and pulled her toward the stall. Let me show my fine items. Isane looked at Nemu and whispered in horror. He can touch me. Nemu nodded slowly and turned toward the vendor. I'm sorry, but we have to go, she said, pulling Isane away. As they walked, they noticed that they literally bumped into everyone they passed. What's going on? Isane whispered, as they walked out of town. Nemu thought for a moment before deciding. It appears that we are just like the living in this world. So it seems, Isane said with a look of surprise on her face. Nemu noted this phenomenon in her notebook. So, what do we do? Isane asked. We just have to adjust our way of doing things, Nemu said, standing up. How do we do that? Isane said with confusion. We act like everyone else, Nemu stated matter-of-factly and walked down the road. Isane nodded as they continued on their way. As night set, they made camp in a clearing in the forest. As they prepared for the night, they noticed it was quiet, too quiet. This is creepy, Isane said looking around the forest. Nemu looked around and agreed. Yes it is, she said. Maybe it's because there is a lot of hollow activity at night. I don't think so, Isane replied. I don't feel any hollows near at all. We will have to verify this, Nemu decided, getting up. I shall scout around and see what I can find. I don't think that is a good idea, Isane stated, feeling a presence around her. It's fine, I won't be gone long, Nemu assured her, and disappeared into the trees. As Nemu walked, she tried to feel any hollow residue, but couldn't. She did feel a weird sort of energy but she couldn't fully comprehend it. She stopped and extended her senses only to be grabbed from behind and quickly knocked out. Isane noticed that Nemu's spiritual pressure had suddenly dipped. She quickly stood up, pulled out her zanpakuto and waited, her senses heightened. As she listened she felt a tremor from underneath. She tried to get away, only to have a pair of hands grab her and pull her under. SB. Naruto jumped from tree to tree, heading toward the bandits' camp. The bandit he had captured and silenced told him that a group of missing nin from Kumo led the group. They were C-ranked missing nin. Naruto sighed. He was hoping for at least someone who would give him a decent fight. As he spotted the camp he formed a cross-shaped hand seal and said, Kage Bushin no just you. Soon 5 clones stood next to him. He ordered them to scout the perimeter and find out if they had any prisoners. He soon received the clones' memories and knew that they had a cage of women near the west side of camp. He also learned that the missing nin had brought in 2 more. They were taken to a tent in the middle of camp. He knew he had to save them before anything bad happened. Let's do this, he said and faded into the night. SB. Isane started to awaken and felt a cold draft against her skin. As she opened her eyes she noticed that she was almost naked. She had been stripped to her underwear and found herself tied to a pole. Next to her was Nemu in her black panties and bra. She looked around and saw that their things were in a pile in the corner. The flap of their shelter suddenly opened to reveal two men with strange symbols on their foreheads. To her it looked like a pair of clouds, but there was a line through them. "Looks like one is awake," said a short, green-haired man of average height. "Who are you?" Isane said as she struggled against her bonds. "I am your new master," the shorter man said with a smile. "Now, be a good girl and it won't hurt much." Isane tried to undo her bonds, but they were too tight. "I am going to die here," she thought. Suddenly the sound of people dying filled the air. A bandit ran in and shouted, "We're under attack," only to dash outside again. The two men looked at each other and the taller one said, "Go check it out." His partner nodded and left to obey his orders. The other one looked at Isane and said, "Where were we?" Walking closer to her. SB. Naruto was taking out the bandits as quickly as possible. He had created over 50 clones and had them attack the camp all at once. He assigned a group of clones to free the girls from the cages and led them to safety. As he fought, he felt the memories of one of his clones enter his mind. One of the missing nin was out and ready to fight. Naruto headed toward the middle of the camp and landed in front of the man. "So, you're the one who attacking out camp," the nin said with anger. "Yep, that me," Naruto said with a smile. "Fine, I'll just kill you and go back to having my fun," the nin said and went through a few hand signs. "Doden, Mud Dragon Justu." A large dragon came from the ground and headed toward Naruto. Naruto dodged to the side and went through his own set of hand signs, Fuden, air bullets. He sent 5 large balls of compressed air at his target. The missing nin eyes widened and he flashed a set of hand signs, Doden, earth wall. A wall of earth came up from the group and blocked the wind. Naruto ran toward him and climbed up the wall. He jumped off the top, a ball of blue energy forming in his hand, Rasengan. Naruto thrust his hand forward and caught his target in the head. As Naruto landed, nothing was left of the missing nin. "One down and one to go," Naruto said and headed toward the tent where the two girls were being held. SB. Isane watched in fear as the man came toward her. She tried to get away but she was trapped. As he was about to grab her, a blade suddenly burst through his heart. Isane watched in horror as the man dropped to the ground, dead. She turned to discover the identity of her victor. Standing in front of her was a tall man with long blonde hair. He was wearing a headband like the others, but it was decorated with a different symbol. "Are you okay?" he asked, reached for her hand. Isane, unsure of his intentions, tried to move away. He noticed this and stopped. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, holding his hands up. Isane looked at him and slowly nodded. He came toward her and untied her bonds. As her arms fell from the pole, she pulled them close to her body. She was so scared, if he hadn't come, that man would have had his way with her. She shivered and started to cry, only to find something wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up and saw that the man had taken off his jacket and put it around her. He left her, went over to Nemu, and untied her. Since she was still unconscious, he held her gently in his arms. Isane slowly stood up and walked toward him. "Thank you," she said as he slowly set down Nemu. "It's not a problem," he said with a smile. "Just doing my job. Let's get out of here," he said, scooping up Nemu in his arms and heading out of the tent. Isane nodded and started to follow, only to return to grab their Zanpakuto. She didn't notice that she had left the modified badges in the tent. SB. Nemu slowly opened her eyes and looked around. She noticed that she was in a bed and that she was not fully clothed. She sat up, held the blanket to her, and looked around to see where she was. The door opened. She tensed, only to see Isane walk in, a bowl of food in hand. She was wearing a black t-shirt that seemed to hug her form, with a pair of white capri pants. "Oh good, you're awake," she said with a smile. "Where are we?" Nemu asked, looking around the room. "We are currently in an inn," Isane said, as she set down the bowl of food on a nightstand. "We were attacked 2 nights ago, and you've been out cold." Then, how are we here? Nemu asked, afraid of the answer. I will be the one to answer that, said a voice by the door. Nemu turned to see a blonde-haired man standing by the door. Naruto Uzumaki, at your service. What happened? Nemu asked. Isane proceeded to explain what had happened. Nemu listened and became extremely grateful for what Naruto had done for them. She turned to Isane and questioned, where are our things? I was only able to grab our Zanpakuto, Isane admitted. I couldn't get the badges. Nemu looked, with shock, at Isane. They were stuck. Without those badges, they couldn't get home. Naruto noticed this and saw that they were in trouble. Hey, it's okay. You guys can come with me to Konoha, he said with a smile. Konoha? Nemu said with a questioning look. Yeah, it's my home, he said. I think we can help you try to get home. Nemu knew that they weren't going to be able to get home by themselves. Fine, okay, Nemu said. Great, Naruto said with a smile. Well, I'll leave you two alone. If you need me, I'll be in the next room. Do you think we can trust him? Nemu said, looking at her partner. Isane looked at Nemu and nodded. He saved us when he could have had our way with us, but he didn't. So I think we should trust him. Fine, we will trust him for now, Nemu said, and proceeded to eat the food on the table. Also, can you help me find some clothes? SB. Naruto, Nemu, and Isane walked up the road and soon came upon the large gates of Konoha. Nemu and Isane looked at the gates in awe. They had never seen anything like it. As they approached the gates, they noticed that many people were staring at them. Why are they staring? Nemu whispered to Isane. Isane just shrugged. They then stopped at the front gate and saw the two gate guards coming toward them. Welcome to Konoha, said one of the gate guards, to the group. He then noticed that Naruto was one of the trio. Hey, Naruto, how you been? Hey, Azumo, Naruto said with a smile. They been good, just got done with a mission. Nice, Azumo replied with a smile, and looked at Nemu and Isane. And, who are these two lovely ladies? Isane blushed and Nemu looked at Azumo with confusion. Naruto smiled and began the introductions. This is Nemu and Isane. I helped them out while on my mission. I am taking them to see the Tsunade Ka-san to see if we can help them get home. That's our Naruto, said Azumo, patting him on the back. He pulled out a clipboard and had them write down their names. After everything was said and done, Azumo smiled. Enjoy your stay in Konoha. Naruto waved bye to Azumo, and began to walk again with the girls following close behind. Isane looked around the village in awe. It was huge. She looked up and saw 5 faces coming out of the side of the cliff. I wonder who they are, she thought to herself as they walked. Nemu watched as people with the same headband as Naruto ran around the village. It seemed that everyone who wore it was part of some group, and this group seemed to be fairly large. She also saw many of them who would wave or stop to say hi to Naruto, meaning he was respected. Soon a large tower came into sight, causing Nemu's curiosity to peak. Let's go see Ka-san, Naruto said and led them up to the top of the tower. As they approached a large set of doors, a girl with short black hair, wearing a black-blue kimono, looked up to see them walking toward her. She jumped up and ran over to Naruto, giving him a bear hug. I missed you, she said with a smile. Me too, Shizune Oni-chan, Naruto agreed. But, I've only been gone a week. That's true, but it's still too quiet without you here, she said with a laugh. Naruto just laughed and gave her a big smile. Shizune then noticed Isane and Nemu standing behind him. Naruto, who are the two women behind you? This is Nemu and Isane, Naruto said, introducing the pair. I helped them on my mission and I brought them to talk to Ka-san to see if we can help them get home. That is so you, Naruto, Shizune said knowingly. Be nice, she's having a bad day. Got it, he said and headed toward the doors. He opened the door and shouted, Hi Ka-san. Tsunade jumped out of her chair and looked at her son. Naruto, she said and punched him across the room. Isane and Nemu watched in bewilderment as Naruto flew through a wall and landed on the ground hard. Don't startle me like that. Naruto slowly got up and walked over. Sorry Ka-san, he said with a smile. Tsunade smiled and then noticed the girls. Naruto, why are there two girls with you? She questioned, staring at her son. If you got them pregnant, you're responsible for your actions. Isane blushed and Nemu stared at Tsunade as if she was crazy. No, that is not what's going on, she reassured Tsunade. Naruto offered to bring us here and see if you could help us get home. Oh, he did, Tsunade muttered, shaking her head. She turned to Naruto. So, how did you meet them? Naruto proceeded to give his mission report while Tsunade listened intently. She looked at her son and said, we can see what we can do, but in the meantime, they are your responsibility while they are in the village. Is that understood? Yes Ka-san, he said with a smile. That's a good boy, she beamed, and looked at Nemu and Isane. Welcome to Konoha. I am Tsunade Senju, Godaime Hokage. I am Isane Katetsu, Isane said, with a small bow. Nemu Kuratsuchi, Nemu said, mirroring her friend. It is nice to meet you, Tsunade replied. So where are you two from? Isane started to get nervous wondering what they were going to tell her, but Nemu stepped up with their answer. We come from across the sea. We are here to see what your culture is like and how we can find ways to help each other. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. She felt something was off with their story but knew she could prove anything. In addition, it seemed that they were completely honest about wanting to learn about them. She decided to have Naruto with them at all time, also to have a few Anbu follow them as well. She smiled and said, welcome to Konohagakure. Thank you for having us, Isane said gratefully. Tsunade's tone turned serious. While you are in our village, you are to stay with Naruto at all time, is that clear? Yes ma'am, they replied in unison. Tsunade looked to Naruto. Take care of them. Yes ma'am, he repeated, with a smile as they headed out of her office. I have a feeling life is going to get a lot more interesting, she said to herself, reaching for a bottle of sake. SB. Mayuri stood by his machine and waited for Nemu to check in. They were supposed to check in after the first day to report their progress, but it had been more than 3 days. At first, he chalked it up to Nemu being her usually stupid self, but he knew she wouldn't be this late. Activate their homing beacons, he ordered one of the researchers. After a few minutes, one of the researchers waved to Mayuri. Sir, we can't find their signals, he regretfully responded. What do you mean, we can't find their signals? Mayuri shouted. A quick scan of the screen stated that their signals were not found. This can't be good, Mayuri thought intently. Captain Mayuri stood in front of the other captains and explained what had happened to Nemu and Isane. He was trying to play it off as an equipment malfunction, but it seemed some weren't buying the excuse. Stop trying to play it off as it is nothing, Captain Hitsugaya shouted. We lost 2 lieutenants and you're stating it a simple equipment malfunction. That is what I am saying. Mayuri stated as he looked at the small captain. It is nothing to worry about, and anyway if Nemu is lost I can always make another. What did you just say about your lieutenant? Captain Byakuya Kuchiki said with a hint of anger in his voice, disgraceful. I rather see it as upgrading to a better model, Mayuri stated. Byakuya looked at him in anger and took a step forward only to be stopped by one of the other captains. Enough of this, Head Captain Yamamoto said, we will wait a few more days before sending someone to see what had happened to Lieutenant Katetsu and Kuratsuchi. Dismissed. SB. Naruto lead Nemu and Isane through the streets of Konoha on their way to his place. I glad you guys are staying with me, Naruto said with a large smile. It would have been hard to find a hotel room with the Chunin exams coming up. Chunin exams? Nemu said with a confused look on her face. Naruto hit himself in the forehead. I so stupid, he muttered making Isane giggle. Sorry I forgot you're not from around here. I explain once we get to my place. Nemu nodded and they continued on their way. As they walked, Nemu noticed a girl with short pink hair storming over towards them. Naruto! She shouted and grabbed him by his collar and proceeded to shake him violently. You ruined my date with Sasuke. Do you know how long I've been waiting for that? Do you? Nemu watched in fascination as the pink-haired girl proceeded to beat their caretaker to a bloody pulp. She stood over him panting as he lay on the ground moaning in pain. That will teach you not to train near us, she said. Excuse me, Isane said, getting the pink-haired girl's attention. I can understand you wanting to get back at him for ruining something very important, but we need him alive if you please. Oh, I am sorry, the girl said. My name is Sakura Haruno, Jonin of Konoha. I am Isane Katetsu, Isane replied. We are new to the village and Naruto was put in charge of our safekeeping. You getting protected by him? Sakura said with a little surprise in her voice. If Naruto is protecting them, they must be important people, she thought to herself. Yes, we are, Nemu said. Sakura smiled and said, you're in good hands. He is an idiot at times and kinda dense, but you never find a better guy around. That great thing to know, Isane said, knowing they were in good hands. Naruto smiled at this and slowly got up off the ground. All his bruises and cuts had healed and he was ready to go. Thanks, Sakura. I didn't know you care, Naruto said with a smile, only to have Sakura punch him across the street. Baka, Sakura said and walked away. Naruto sat up and sighed, rubbing his head trying to alleviate the pain. I really need to stop pissing her off. Isane ran over to Naruto and leaned down to make sure he was alright. Was it wise to get her angry? Nemu said as he stood up after Isane looked him over. No matter what I do, I will always manage to piss her off, Naruto said with sigh. Well, that is unfortunate, Nemu said. It's fine, Naruto replied as he stood up. I bet you're hungry, let's get you some food. SB. Mayuri stood in front of the viewing screen scanning for Nemu and Isane. No matter what he tried, he could not pinpoint where they were. He tried setting it to find high spiritual pressure, but the machine detected thousands of large spiritual pressure. He watched in amazement. The people of this world had a lot of power. He was about to do some more research on this when head Captain Yamamoto walked in. Have you had any progress on finding the lieutenants? He asked. I have not, Mayuri stated, but I have found out something very interesting. And what is that, pray tell? Yamamoto said. These worlds seems to have a lot of powerful people in it, Mayuri said. When I tried to search for the lieutenant's spiritual pressure, I found thousands, maybe millions of very high spiritual pressure there. With that many powerful spirit, it is impossible to get a lock on them. This is very troubling, Yamamoto said. I want you to continue to monitor this world and also keep up the search for the lieutenants. Yes, head captain, Mayuri said and went straight back to work. SB. Naruto had led Nemu and Isane to a large house with 2 stories. He opened the door and said, Welcome to my humble abode. You live here? Isane asked in awe. She had seen house like this before, but she never expected for Naruto to live in one. Of course, he said with a smile. Where did you think I lived? Isane turned red in embarrassment. I guess I never thought about it. It's fine, he said as he walked through the hall towards the living room. Nemu looked around and saw that the house was well furnished and most of the walls were filled with pictures. She looked at some of them and saw one with a small Naruto standing with a very old man, wearing a strange hat. As she continued to look at the pictures, she noticed that they were most of Naruto and other people, but none with him and his parents. She finally found one with a man looking like a Naruto and a very beautiful woman with red hair rubbing her belly. That must be his parent, Nemu thought as she looked at the picture. Isane watched Nemu and sat down on the couch. His home was very inviting, it seemed like a great place to raise a family. As they looked around the house, Naruto was in the kitchen making dinner. He had created 3 clones to help so he could get done quickly. He was making smoked salmon with rice and steamed vegetables. To him it was nice to have people over. Most of his friends were busy with their duties or their love lives. Hinata had gotten together with Kiba after Naruto told her that he didn't like her the way she liked him. She was sad but soon found the happiness she deserved in Kiba's arms. Sasuke had told Sakura he loved her after Naruto had brought him back. After that, Naruto had just stopped caring if he would find love. To him it was his fate to be alone for the rest of his life. As he cooked and thought about that, he quickly cheered himself up. Can't dwell on it now, he said and continued to cook. It was an hour later when the food was ready and the table was set. Naruto made sure everything was ready before entering the living room. As he entered, he noticed Nemu standing by his bookshelf with a book on beginning chakra control in her hand, while Isane was sleeping on the couch. Naruto smiled at this and walked towards Nemu. Nemu didn't notice him come towards her. She was too absorbed in the book she was reading. It was telling her that the people in this world use a power called chakra, which was the combination of the physical and spiritual energies in their bodies. She was about to learn how to access this energy when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She jumped and fell to the floor waiting for Mayuri to yell at her for not paying attention, but it never came. She then remembered where she was and saw Naruto standing over her. Sorry for startling you, he said and offered her his hand. Nemu takes it and he pulls her to her feet. It fine, she said, but Naruto noticed that she was hiding something. He knew that he shouldn't press her on it but he would ask her later. Well okay, he said and smiled, dinner is ready, and I'll wake Isane and meet you in the dining room. That's fine, she answered but stopped. Where is the dining room? Naruto smiled and pointed towards a door on the far side of the wall. Just through there. Nemu nodded and headed towards the dining room. Naruto walked towards the couch and leaned over Isane. He shook her lightly. Isane, time to get up. Isane stirred and blinked. She saw a blurry form above her causing her to go into combat mode. She threw a punch into her attacker's stomach and then got on top of them ready to strike. She got a good look at her attacker and saw that it was Naruto. She leaned in close and said, I am so sorry, it was a reflex. Naruto blushed. She was so close to him and he couldn't help to notice her beauty. It's fine, he said as he looked at her. Are you hurt? She asked him with worry in her voice. Naruto's blush turned even redder as she leaned in closer. I'm fine, he said. He couldn't look at her without blushing. Can you get off me please? Isane finally noticed that she was straddling the blonde. She quickly got off him and blushed in embarrassment. I so sorry, she said, not looking at him. He looked at the blushing girl and smiled. It's fine, he said, you were just startled at all. Isane looked at Naruto with a smile. He was a gentleman and was going out of his to make sure she was comfortable. I just glad you're alright, Isane said. Naruto smiled and replied, it will take more than a punch to the gut to take me down. Isane giggled at this, causing Naruto to laugh a little as well. After a minute he regained his composure. Well, dinner is ready, so come on, let's eat. Nemu watched as Naruto and Isane entered the room. She had entered the dining room and waited for a moment before she heard a sound come from the other room. She watched the entire scene that happened between the blonde and the sliver. It was quite amusing. As they sat down to eat, she noticed the spread on the table. It looked like it could feed at least 5 people and took more than an hour to make. She stared at the blonde and wondered what he did to get it all done. Nemu looked at Naruto as he smiled and made small talk with Isane about how the food was. She started to feel his spiritual pressure. At first it seemed very small, but then she noticed that he was suppressing it quite well as if it was second nature. As she probed past it, she saw that he had a huge amount of spiritual pressure. It was as large as Ichigo Kurasaki's when he fought Aizen, yet there was still more. What is he? She pondered as she felt his power. She was pulled out of her musing when she noticed a voice calling her name. She looked and saw Naruto calling her. Yes, she answered. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. Nemu looked at him confused. I am fine, she said. Why do you ask? Well, you haven't touched your food, he said, concerned. I was wondering if you were feeling well. She noticed this and blushed. A ting of red came across her face. Oh, sorry, I was think. She said, hoping he wouldn't scold her. Oh, that's okay, he said with a smile. I thought you were sick or something. She was shocked by his reaction, but she didn't show it. It seemed he was concerned about her health. She let a near unnoticeable smile come across her face. Thank you for your concern, she said and started to eat. Naruto noticed her smile and smiled back. No problem, he stated, and they continued to eat. SB. Nemu sat on her bed and pondered what had transpired of the course of their expedition to this world. It seemed that the people here had very high spiritual pressures, but there was no signs of hollow activity as of yet. What puzzled her most was the culture of the people. They seemed to be a mixture of the modern world and the old ways, like the Soul Society, but in an entirely different way. As she continued to ponder her thoughts, she didn't notice Isane walk in the room with only a large t-shirt on. Hey Nemu, Isane said, getting the Nemu attention. Yes Isane, she asked, wondering what her partner wanted. Isane sat down next to her and sighed. It's been a weird couple of days, hasn't it? Nemu thought about it for a moment and agreed. It had been a weird couple of days. They have traveled to a new world that they knew nothing about, and they could be seen and touched by everyone here. They were captured by a group of bandits and nearly raped, but were saved by their new blonde friend. Now they were staying in his house and he was their bodyguard. Yes, it has been, she finally said as she got all her thoughts in order. Isane lied back and stared at the ceiling. This world is a lot different from the Soul Society. Yes, it is, Nemu said, and I can't wait to learn more about it. Isane smiled and thought of a certain blonde. I feel the same, she said, and got up and headed towards her bed. Night, Nemu. Sleep well Isane, Nemu said, and turned off the light and got into her bed. The blankets covered her form, allowing her to fall asleep with dreams about a certain blonde. SB. Naruto sat on his roof gathering sage chakra. He could feel Nemu and Isane in the house and everyone else in the village. As he sat there, he felt a familiar presence fill his head. Hi brat, Kyuubi said inside of Naruto's head. Naruto sighed and let go of the nature chakra he had gathered. Hey Kyuubi, what's up? Oh nothing, just wondering if you're going to mate with the two in the house. Kyuubi said with a perverted grin. Aro Kitsune, Naruto replied, shaking his head. After the war, he and Kyuubi had formed a somewhat strained friendship. Naruto knew if it wasn't for Kyuubi he would have died when he was little, and Kyuubi knew without Naruto he would be sealed in a statue with his brother and sisters. So they had put aside their differences and became friends. It worked at some points and at other they wanted to kill each other, but they got past all that. Kyuubi rolled his eyes and replied, I know you want to. You haven't stopped looking at them all day, especially the tall one. I have not, Naruto said, blushing. You can't fool me brat, Kyuubi stated. I've been with you since you were born, I know you better than you do. Naruto sighed, knowing the fuzzball was right. So what? He said, trying to brush it off. Is it a crime to find someone attractive? Kyuubi laughed at this before answering, no it's not, but not doing anything to get them in bed with you is. You're a pervert, you know that. Naruto stated, shaking his head. I can't believe I share with a perverted fuzzball, he thought to himself. Hey, I'm not a pervert, Kyuubi stated, I am a super pervert. You did not just do that, Naruto said in shock. It's Aro Sennin all over again. Kyuubi laughed. Aro Kitsune, Naruto said, and got up and head to bed, with Kyuubi laughing the entire way. SB. The sun started to peak above the Hokage monument and signaled for Naruto to get up and start his training. He pulled on a pair of black pants and his crystal he got from his mother. He yawned and messed up his hair. He quickly headed out of the house and into the backyard, to his personal training grounds. He looked around and took in a breath of the morning air. He smiled to himself and formed his favorite hand sign and said, let's get this start. Soon a large cloud of smoke filled the air. Naruto was now surrounded by over 150 clones of himself all ready to go. Okay guys, you know the drill. The original Naruto said, and a battle cry filled the air and the battle was on. Nemu and Isane woke to a loud explosion fill the air. They both got out of bed and stood ready for battle but saw no one there. They looked around only to see something fly past their window. Nemu ran to the window and looked out. What she saw shocked her to the core. Naruto was fight clones of himself as it was the most normal thing in the world. Nemu, what is it? Isane said, wondering what was going on. Nemu moved from the window and said, look. Isane looked, saw the Naruto battle royal, and was as shocked as Nemu. How is that possible? She stammered and looked at Nemu. I have no idea, but I plan to find out, she said and stormed out of the room towards the battle. What she failed to notice that she was only in her bra and panties. Isane ran after Nemu, wanting to stop her from heading outside. Nemu, wait. She shouted, but she was too far away. Nemu headed out the back door and walked towards the battling Narutos. She stopped by one of the trees and watched the battle. There was one Naruto battling all the other ones, which Nemu thought was the original. The original Naruto was taking out clones left and right. He had set his limit at Taijutsu and his futon justice. He quickly dodged an attack from his left and flash 5 hand signs, futon, wind dragon bullet. He took in a huge breath and exhaled a large dragon made of wind. It tore through a lot of the clones and Naruto took on a group to his left with a series of punches and kicks. He then jumped in the air and went through another series of hand signs, futon, wind blades. With a wave of his hand, a huge blade of wind tore through the rest of the clones. Naruto landed in a crouch waiting to see if any more clones were left. After a few moments he stood up, ran his hand through his hair, and sighed. Need to get faster, he said to himself as he stretched. Nemu watched this and noticed that he was shirtless. She saw that was well built, not overly like a bodybuilder but like a martial artist. Nemu also noticed that he also had a lot of scars all over his torso, but the one that stood out was the one near his heart. It was the size of a fist. What happened to him for that type of scar to happen? Nemu thought. She noticed that he was walking her way and stepped out from her hiding place and said, Naruto, can I talk for a moment? Naruto looked up and saw Nemu but quickly turned away from her, blushing up a storm. Hi Nemu, he stammered, but in his mind he was think, why is she only in her bra and panties? Kyuubi on the other hand was smiling up a storm, you are so lucky kid, take her now. Shut it Kyuubi, Naruto said to Kyuubi. He kept his eye on the ground and said, Hi Nemu, how are you doing today? I am fine, Nemu said but noticed something, Naruto wasn't looking at her. I am unattractive, she thought. Naruto, is there a reason why you are not looking at me? Naruto didn't answer for a moment before he said, Nemu, aren't you forgetting something? Nemu thought for a moment then said, No, I am not. Naruto turned his head and once again got an eyeful of Nemu's body. She was beautiful. She was slender with all the right curves in the right places. Are you sure? Naruto said with emphasis. Nemu thought for a moment before she felt a clawed draft against her skin. She looked down at herself and saw she was only in her bra and panties. Excuse me for a moment, Nemu said, turning red, and ran inside. Isane was heading outside to get Nemu when she ran past as fast as possible. Isane sighed, I guess she finally noticed. She said, and noticed Naruto outside shirtless. She blushed and took a few moments to look over the blonde. They don't make them like that anymore, she thought to herself with a blush. SB. Nemu and Isane sat at the table eating breakfast, and Naruto was cooking. After the incident earlier that morning, every time Naruto looked at Nemu he blushed. Isane found this amusing, while Nemu wondered why he kept blushing. She finished her meal and brought the plate over to Naruto. Naruto noticed her and blushed, taking the plate from her. Thank you for the meal, she said. No problem, Naruto replied with a blush. She nodded and walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch. She was still a little embarrassed about what had happened, but was happy Naruto treated her with respect. Back home Mayuri would yell at her and harm her for being a dumb girl. It was nice to treat it nicely and not like an object that needs fixing. As she sat there she wondered how Naruto created the clones earlier. She knew it had to deal with the chakra she read about the other night, but she wanted to learn more. How does it work? How do they control it? And what can they do with it? Also, if all the people in the knew how to use chakra and if she could learn how to use it. Soon Isane joined her on the couch and they waited for Naruto to finish cleaning up. So what are plans for today? Isane asked Nemu as they sat there. Nemu thought for a moment then replied, I was going to ask Naruto to show us how his powers work. Yeah, it would be great to learn how he did that. Isane said, remembering the clones he was fighting. Nemu nodded and replied, yes, it would be very informative and maybe we can learn how to use it as well. Isane looked at Nemu with a confused look. You think we can learn how to do that as well? I don't know, but what I read last night says they use a power called chakra, Nemu said. Chakra? Isane asked. Nemu was about to answer when they heard a voice behind them say, chakra is the combination of the physical and spiritual energies in our bodies. It is essential to live and is also the power behind our justice. Justu? Nemu asked confused. Naruto remembered that they weren't from there and didn't understand anything he was talking about. Okay, let me start from the beginning, he said, getting their attention. He walked to a chair in front of the couch. We are here in the elemental nations. We are broken up into many different lands and are ruled by the daimyo of each land. There are the samurai forces that the daimyo commands and there are the shinobi. Shinobi? Nemu asked. Yes, shinobi, Naruto said. They are basically assassins, warriors, or anything we are hired for. You're a shinobi? Nemu asked. Yeah, all my life, he said with a smile. Show me, Nemu said, leaning in close to Naruto. Naruto blushed and said, sure, but first I think a trip to the library would help you guys understand what I will show you better. Nemu nodded and grabbed Naruto's hand, pulling him out of his chair and towards the door, with Isane close behind. Nemu sat in the midst of several tall stacks of books. Once they have arrived at the library, Nemu had proceeded to empty the shelves of all the books pertaining to the history of the elemental nations and the shinobi. She tried to gain access to books on chakra and justice but was denied because they were for registered shinobi only. Therefore, she proceeded to read all she could about the land. She learned of the 5 major shinobi villages. There was the village hidden in the mist, clouds, rock, sand, and leaves. She learned of the 3 of the 4 great shinobi wars. This was only due to the fact that the 4th had ended only a few short years ago. Naruto watched in awe as Nemu finished book after book. He had heard of fast readers, but this was just insane. Isane, on the other hand, was enjoying a light romance novel that she had found in the fiction section. It was about a leaf ninja who had been kidnapped and the lengths her love would go to save her. She sighed to herself and wished she had someone like that, but alas, no one in the Soul Society matched her expectations. As she read, she noticed a tall ninja with gravity-defying silver hair walk past with a small blue book in his hand. Every so often he would giggle perversely. She wondered what the big deal was about the book he held. She had noticed several men and women reading it, and if he was reading while walking, it must be good. She got up and headed towards the shelves, determined to find a copy. Naruto watched the two as they read and smiled. He was glad that they were having a good time, but he was bored. He pulled out a scroll and unsealed a pen and black notebook. He made sure that no one was near him as he proceeded to write. It was a known fact that Naruto had continued the Ika Ika series in Jiraiya's honor. He had made it less smut and more story-driven. He still included the occasional explicit sex scene, but not as many as his old master. Most of his ideas came from talking with Kyuubi. The only stipulation that was placed on him, by Tsunade, was that if he ever peeked in on the women's bath, he would end up 6 feet under. He was currently working on his latest edition, Ika Ika, Desert Nights. It was rumored that this would be the best one yet. As he wrote, he didn't notice his old sensei, Kakashi, walk over to him. "Hey Naruto," Kakashi greeted, causing Naruto to jump and quickly close his notebook. He turned around and saw Kakashi standing over him. "Hi Kakashi-sensei, how have you been?" Kakashi smiled and giggled like a pervert. "I've been good, just enjoying your last edition," he said with wicked grin. Naruto rolled his eyes. "I can see that," he stated and proceeded to reseal his notebook. Kakashi noticed this and a glint came to his eye. "Is that the last draft for the new Ika Ika?" he asked sweetly. Naruto gave Kakashi a dirty look. "No. But, just a little peek," Kakashi said, trying to get the scroll, but Naruto quickly put it in a seal on his jacket. "No," Naruto said again. "Last time I let you read it beforehand, I didn't get it back at all. I had to track you down and pry it from your hand, remember?" Kakashi smiled and rubbed the back of his head nervously. "Sorry," he mumbled, hoping to earn some Ika Ika points, but Naruto wasn't budging. "Sorry Kakashi-sensei, you have to wait for it like everyone else," Naruto said, rising to his feet. Kakashi sighed and walked away, disappointed that his plan failed. While this little conversation had been going on, Isane tried to find a copy of the small blue book she had seen, but couldn't find a copy on the shelves. She then noticed a small orange book with the same title and eagerly picked it up. She walked back over to the table Nemu was sitting at and took the seat across from here. She opened the book and started reading. At first, she blushed a bit, but the further she read the more red she turned. She read to about the 5th chapter before snapping the book shut. She was as red as a beet. Who would write such smut, especially in such great detail, she thought as she set the book down. Nemu looked up from her reading at the sound of Isane slamming the orange book shut. Nemu wondered what was in the book to make Isane turn such a dark shade of red. Nemu closed her book and reached for the orange one, but Isane snatched it from her. "This is not a good read," she stammered. Nemu looked at her with confusion on her face but quickly shrugged it off and went back to her book. Isane walked quickly over to the help desk and turned in the book to the librarian. The librarian saw the expression on Isane's face and the copy of the Ika Ika in her hand. She took pity on the poor girl and took the book away from here. "This is from the old series," the librarian explained. "Only old men and perverts read this one." She pulled out a blue-covered book and handed it to Isane. "These are the ones you want to read. The new author has made it into a respectable series, enjoy." Isane took the book and looked at it curiously. The title was Ika Ika, Lonely Nights. She opened the book and read the first page, expecting it to be a copy of the orange book. Much to her surprise, she was pulled into the story. The librarian watched with a smile as Isane walked back to read the small blue book in comfort. She then noticed Naruto walking around the shelves, pulled out her own copy of the blue book and walked over to him. "Excuse me," she whispered, getting his attention. She held out the book and a pen. "Can you please sign this for me?" Naruto smiled. "Sure. I'd love to. Who should I make it out to?" "Asa Yamada," Asa said, her face becoming red. Naruto smiled and opened the book. Taking the pen he wrote, "To Asa, with love, Naruto Uzumaki." He handed back the book and pen and watched as her face lit up. "Thank you," she said, leaning in close. "If you ever have writer block, I would love to help you out." Naruto blinked. "I'll keep that in mind." Kyuubi had a huge smile on his face. "Take her now, you know you want to." Naruto blushed. "Shut up Aro Kitsune." Kyuubi just laughed at him and left him alone. Nemu had just finished her last book and sat up. She proceeded to take all the books back to their places on the shelves. She walked over to Isane and looked over her shoulder. Isane, being so absorbed in her book, failed to notice Nemu. They both got to a certain part of the book, the blood rushing to their faces. Can a woman really bend like that? Nemu asked, startling Isane. Isane quickly closed the book and stared up at Nemu a little peeved. Don't scare me like that, she stated as she got up out of her chair, the blue book still in hand. I am sorry if I have startled you, Nemu said. It's just that you were so absorbed in that book I was wondering what was going on, also it was a fair question. Can we really bend like that? Isane blushed at what Nemu was implying. I don't know, you'd have to try it to know. Nemu looked at Naruto, with a tint of red in her face. Maybe someday I will, she responded quietly. She saw the glance that Nemu gave Naruto and blushed as well. Maybe someday, Isane said. Naruto stood to the side and looked over at Nemu and Isane. He saw them glance at him and noticed the blush on their faces. He wondered what was going on with them, but Kyuubi was smiling and giggling perversely. The kid is going to have a good time if he plays his cards right, Kyuubi thought, grinning. SB. Mayuri stood in front of the screen, his eyes filled with frustration. He couldn't find them at all. Everything he had tried had no effect. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, inside of another haystack, locked in a safe in the most secure place on earth. Where could those blasted females be? He muttered to himself. While Mayuri was worrying about how to find the lieutenants, most of the other Soul Reapers were also worried for their safety. Most knew of their mission to this new world, but it'd been over 2 weeks since they had last checked in, and many were getting worried that something terrible had happened. Captain Unohana was worried for both lieutenants but knew they could take care of themselves, but without recent contact, she feared the worst. Head Captain Yamamoto sat at his desk wondering what he was going to do about his 2 missing lieutenants. He knew Mayuri was trying his best to find them, but he knew he wasn't enough. He needed to get the best scientific mind on this. Turning to his lieutenant, get me Kazuki Urahara. SB. Naruto lead Nemu and Isane towards the Hokage Tower. After the library, Nemu had asked if she could speak to the Hokage about something. Naruto was more than happy to oblige. As they walked, they couldn't help but marvel at the peaceful atmosphere of the village. From what Nemu had learned from books, this place was home to some of the most powerful people in this world. Most had already died, but to have that kind of strength was amazing. What she had read about the Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju, was he could literally create a forest with his chakra. If this world was filled with people like that, even the captains would have trouble fighting them. They soon reached the Hokage Tower and went inside. Shizune saw them and ushered them in. Suan sat at her desk going through her paperwork with a frown on her face. She noticed the group walk in and was happy for a distraction from the paperwork. Hello everyone, she said, welcoming. We are doing well, thank you for asking, Isane replied. That is great, how is the village treating you? Suan asked. Nemu was the first to speak up. It has been very pleasant. It is nice to have some peace. So, where you're from, there is always strife? Suan asked. Nemu, not wanting to give too much away, replied, yes, but not in the way you think. It's mostly disagreements between members of the ruling council. Tsunade sighed, knowing exactly what that is like. It is quite annoying, isn't it? Yes, Nemu replied with a sigh. So, what brings you to my fine office? Tsunade asked, wanting to get down to business. Nemu looked at her for a moment before speaking. I was wondering if it is possible for us to learn to use chakra. Tsunade tilted her head to one side. I really don't know. We would have to check your chakra coils to see. Why is that? Isane asked. Most of the time people start to learn to use chakra at a young age. Most adults who try to use it cannot because their chakra coils seal off from lack of use, Suan had explained. But, since you are not from here, it may be possible for you to use chakra. Nemu smiled, hopefully. If they could learn to use this chakra, they could use it to teach the other Shinigami and be ready for any threats. Thanks you for the help. Tsunade smiled. It's not a problem, but I would like to know if you have anything to teach us in return. What do you mean? Nemu asked, getting a little nervous. Since you are from a faraway land, there must be some foreign knowledge that you can teach us, Tsunade stated, looking Nemu directly in the eyes. It seems only fair, if we are to teach you how to use chakra. Nemu was silent for a moment. May I have a private word outside with Isane, before I give you our answer? Nemu asked. She needed Isane's approval in her decision. She didn't want to reveal any of the techniques, but if they didn't, they would lose the opportunity to learn about this chakra. That is fine, Tsunade replied. Thank you, Nemu said and led Isane out of the office. Isane looked at Nemu with worry. What are we going to do? We can't reveal any of our techniques to them, we will be executed if the Seratai finds out. I don't know, Nemu said. But, we need to learn about this chakra and see if we can use it. There are risks, but maybe we can bargain with her. Isane thought for a moment. We can say that we will only teach one person, she offered. That might work, Nemu replied. They can't use our techniques anyway. We will have to see. Isane said. Also, what if we can't use this chakra after all, what should we do then? Nemu thought for a moment before answering. Just leave that to me. Isane nodded and they headed back into the office where Naruto and Suan were waiting. Tsunade sat at her desk, waiting for their answer, hoping they would agree. Nemu stepped forward. We are willing to teach you our technique, but we have a few stipulations. Tsunade was intrigued. Name them, she said in true negotiator fashion. Nemu was relieved at this response. First, we are willing to teach you our technique if we're able to use chakra. Tsunade thought for a moment before answering. Sounds fair, any others? Also, we will only teach on person, Isane said. Tsunade stared at them. Why only one person? She asked. We want to see if they are able to learn our techniques. If we can't learn to use chakra, then maybe you can't learn our techniques, Nemu said. That is very true, Tsunade replied as she pondered. I will do it, if you let me choose the one you train. Nemu looked at Tsunade and frowned a bit. She was hoping that they got to choose, but she could feel that Tsunade wouldn't compromise further. We find these terms agreeable, Nemu said as Tsunade smiled. It seems we have a deal, Suan said with a smile. Now the person you are going to train is Naruto. Nemu and Isane sighed in relief. They didn't want to teach someone they didn't know. Tsunade smiled. I figured you would approve of my choice. I presumed that you wouldn't like teaching someone you hardly know, so you're going to train this knucklehead here. Thank you, Hokage, Nemu said with a bow. Isane did the same. It's fine, Tsunade said. Now let's go see if the coils are any good, shall we? SB. Urahara sat at his desk. He had just received hell butterflies from the Soul Society. It seemed that Mayuri had discovered a new world, separate from their own, and had sent 2 lieutenants to investigate. Unfortunately, they had yet to contact the Soul Society, and it'd been 2 weeks since their departure. Head Captain Yamamoto had asked him to look over Mayuri's design and see if he could find the lieutenants and possibly help with research. This intrigued him. With the discovery of this world, there was a whole new source of knowledge that he could obtain and teach to others. He smiled to himself as he decided to help. Hey, Tessai, he called, and a large masculine man entered the room. Yes, Kazuki. Get my tools. We've got a little project to build, Urahara said with a smile. Tessai nodded and went to the training area. As he headed out of his office, he saw a young girl with long orange hair walk through his shop door. Sorry I'm late, everyone, Orihime called with a large smile on her face. After the winter war, she had started to work at Urahara's candy shop. The pay was okay, but she was also training her powers so she could get stronger. She was glad she had friend that protected her with all their might, but she wanted to stop being a burden. This motivated her to train hard. The result was that she had gotten better at using her shields. She walked into the back and put on her work apron. This showed off her impressive figure. She smiled at everyone and set to work. Urahara watched her work and smiled. Hey Orihime, Urahara called, getting her attention. Yes, Mr. Urahara. I'm going to need your help with something in the training area, he said. It seems that the Soul Society needs my help. Orihime was ecstatic. She was going to be able to help her friends. I'll be right there. She jumped up so fast, she tripped over her feet, falling down. Owie. Are you all right? Ururu said as Orihime rubbed her backside in pain. Yeah, I'm fine, she replied, getting up. You know, you're still a klutz, Jinta said, only to get hit in the head by Urahara. It's not nice to be mean to girls, he said as Jinta rubbed his head, trying to alleviate the pain. I'm sorry, Jinta mumbled and then ran out to the front of the shop. Orihime sighed. She had wanted to tell him that it was okay, but he ran away a little too fast. She turned to Urahara. Shall we get started? He simply nodded and they went to the secret training ground to start work on the project. SB. Nemu sat on a hospital bed waiting for the medic to come and check her out. After they had finished talking to the Hokage, they were sent straight to the hospital to have their chakra coils checked. Isane was in another room changing into her hospital gown while Nemu waited to be seen. She wondered who would come in and check them. Soon the door opened and a tall woman with dark blue hair and purple eyes walked in. What fascinated Nemu the most was the fact that there were no pupils in her eyes. Hello, I am Hinata Hyuga. I will be your medic today. Nemu Kuratsuchi, Nemu replied. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, Hinata said with a smile. So, are you ready for your examination? Yes, Nemu said with determination. Hinata smiled and nodded. Okay then, lie down for me and I will start the procedure. Nemu complied. Hinata walked to her side and smiled. This won't hurt a bit, she said and then whispered, Byakugan. Nemu watched as veins suddenly pulsed around Hinata's eyes. She wondered what this allowed her to see. While Nemu pondered this, Hinata checked her chakra coils. As she looked, she saw that they were still intact and could be put to use as soon as someone opened up her tenketsu. The reason it seemed that her coils were usable was she had been using the spiritual power without the physical. This preserved the coils, allowing them to be opened slowly. It would take a while for her to do any just due to the fact she need to build her reserves. It seems you will be able to use chakra after all, Hinata said with a smile. Nemu was surprised. She thought that she had been living off false hope. I am going to open your tenketsu points so your chakra will start to flow. Nemu nodded and Hinata proceeded to open her 361 tenketsu points. As Hinata slowly opened each point, she could feel the power start to flow. It made her feel better than she had in years. She felt as if she could take on a captain and not break a sweat. Soon Hinata was done and Nemu's chakra was flowing. All done, Hinata said with a smile. Nemu quickly sat up but Hinata stopped her. Take it easy, it will take you a while for your body to adjust to having chakra, so you're going to rest for now. But, Nemu started to say but was cut off by Hinata. No buts, Hinata ordered. You need to let your body adjust or you won't be able to use chakra at all. Nemu nodded. At least I can start learning soon, she thought. As she was thinking, Hinata had started opening Isane's tenketsu points. Isane could feel the power in her body and couldn't wait to learn, but she was going to have to wait till they were released from the hospital first. SB. Naruto walked into Nemu and Isane's room, holding a few bowls of ramen in his hands. Hey guys, how you feeling? He asked as he slowly set down the food. I feel powerful, Nemu said. I feel as if I can take on anything. I was the same when I started to use chakra, Naruto said as he sat down next to her bed. It's a great feeling and it will only get better. I am looking forward to it, Nemu said. Naruto smiled. I'm glad. We're going to have a lot of fun training each other. Training? Nemu asked. Yeah, I am the one who's going to train you to use your chakra. I am glad, Nemu said with a nearly unnoticeable smile. That's good, Naruto said, noting her subtle joy. But for now, let's get some food in you guys. He went over to the bowls of ramen and gave one to each girl. Eat up, it's the food of the gods. What is it? Isane asked. Ramen, of course, Naruto said with a smile. Nemu was the first to start eating. She had to admit this was very good. Most of the time she had instant ramen, but this ramen was handmade, making it a lot better. Soon they set into a comfortable silence. The only sound that could be heard was the slurp of noodles. Soon everyone had finished eating and Naruto proceeded to collect the now empty bowls. Isane couldn't help but smile. Ever since they had met, he had been nothing but helpful and nice. He didn't try to take advantage of them in their weakened state, and he promised to help them get home. Overall, he was a great guy, one that only showed up once in a blue moon. Now he was keeping them company while they rested from getting their chakra running. Isane turned to Naruto. So, now that we have a moment of peace, tell me about yourself. Naruto grinned. Okay, I am Naruto Uzumaki, I am 20 years old, and I am Jonin of Konoha. I like ramen, training, pulling pranks, writing, and reading. I dislike traitors, cowards, perverts, rapists, and guys who treat women as objects. Both Nemu and Isane blushed at his bluntness. I enjoy gardening, learning new justice, and my dream is to become the next Hokage. Wow, that is a lofty goal, Isane said. Yeah, but I can do it, he said with a smile. I never break my promises. That's a good trait to have, Isane said. Really, most people think that it makes me an idiot, he sighed. Well, they are the idiots, Nemu said. Naruto smiled. Thanks, it means a lot to me. He then looked at them. So, you know about me, can you tell me about yourselves? Nemu looked at Naruto. My name is Nemu Kuratsuchi, 21 years old, and researcher. I like research, reading, and learning. I dislike onions, hurtful people, she thought of her father and sighed, and people who treat women with disrespect. I like to conduct research and learn about new things. You're a researcher, Naruto said with a smile. I guess that it is to be expected. After all, you were sent here to research. He laughed a little and Nemu gave him an odd look. Sorry, bad joke. It is fine, Nemu said. Naruto smiled then looked at Isane. It's your turn. I am Isane Katetsu, I am 22 years old, and I am also a researcher and medic, Isane said, getting a smile from Naruto. I like reading, helping people, my sister, and my friends. I dislike traitors, cowards, rapists, and men who disrespect women. I like to learn new healing techniques, helping my friends, and hanging out with my sister. That's cool, Naruto said with a smile. What's your sister like? Well, she is a very excitable. She likes to jump into things without thinking, Isane said with a sigh. But, she is a very loyal person who would never leave a friend behind. She sounds like a fun person, Naruto said with a smile. Do you have any siblings? Isane asked, only to see Naruto's expression change. I am an orphan, he said sadly. I never knew who my parents were, till a few years back. I am so sorry, I didn't mean to bring it up, Isane said regrettably. Naruto gave her a friendly smile. It's fine, he stated. I have precious people that I love, so I'm never alone. Isane looked him in the eye and could see that he was telling the truth, but was also hiding a deep feeling of loneliness. She didn't want to press him on it. I am glad, she said with a smile, but in her mind she wondered what could cause someone to have those eyes. He noticed the time and sighed. I'd better be off. I've got to get stuff ready for your training tomorrow. See you later. Have a good night, Isane said with a wave. Have a good day, Nemu said. Naruto waved back to them before heading out of the room. After he had left, Nemu looked at Isane. It seems that our host has had a hard life, she said curiously. It seems that way, Isane replied. But, he seems to be stronger for it. That is true, Nemu said. He is truly different. Isane just nodded and sighed. She laid her head down on her pillow and slowly drifted off to sleep. Nemu watched this and sighed. She saw a notepad on the table along with a pen. She picked up said items and began to record what had happened up to that point. As she wrote, her thoughts went back to the blonde. She could see that he was someone who had seen horror that could cripple another person, yet he was still going strong. He was cheery and excitable. He was never sad for long from what she had seen. She remembered seeing him train, shirtless, and blushed. Maybe, just maybe, she had found someone she could confide in too. SB. Mayuri stood outside of Urahara's shop with a frown on his face. He didn't need this man help. He could figure out how to find the lieutenants on his own, but alas, the head captain had ordered for him to work with Urahara. He was not alone in his venture to the living world. He was accompanied by a young woman with black hair that was pinned up in the back. She wore a pair of glasses that gave her the sexy librarian look. This was Naneo Eyes, lieutenant of Squad 8. The head captain had ordered her to accompany Captain Kuratsuchi, because he wanted some to watch him. She stood by the clone-looking captain and sighed. She wasn't glad to be assigned this mission knowing that none of the paperwork would get done in without her there, but ordered were orders. Why do we need this idiot's help? Mayuri grumbled as they walked into the shop. Naneo looked at him with annoyance. The head captain thinks you need help in finding them, so he asked Urahara. Suck it up and deal with it. I rather just create 2 new lieutenants. It would be much faster and could prove useful, Mayuri said with a wicked smile. Naneo looked at Mayuri and slowly took off her glasses. Mayuri recoiled away from her gaze. You will follow the orders given to you and not mention that idea again, she said, as she got a small nod from Mayuri. Good. She put her glasses back on and walked towards the back of the store. SB. Nemu and Isane were released from the hospital the next day. Naruto was waiting for them at the front desk with a smile on his face. Let's get going, you two. We have places to go and things to do. Where are we going? Isane asked him as they left the hospital. We heading to the Shinobi Outfitters so we can get you guys outfitted for training, he explained, leading them down the street. But I thought we were only going to learn how to use chakra, Nemu asked. Yeah, you are, Naruto said as they merged with the crowd. But, if you're learning to use chakra, you have to learn other shinobi skills as well. I see, Nemu said, wondering what else they were going to learn. By the time you're done training, you will be able to give a Jonin a run for his money, believe it, he said as they walked. Nemu and Isane followed, wondering what the day had in store for them. Naruto led Nemu and Isane down the street toward the shinobi shop, Wolf's Den. It was the best place to get shinobi gear in Konoha. As they walked, Naruto went through his mental checklist of what he was getting. First, he was going to get them training gear, weights, kunai, and shuriken. Nemu and Isane walked behind him and wondered what type of shinobi gear they were going to get, but they would find out soon enough. Soon they arrived at the Wolf's Den and headed inside. As they entered, a young woman, with bun in her hair, was behind the counter. This was Tenten Hyuga, wife of Neji Hyuga. Ever since she became the weapon mistress of Konoha, she had worked at her father's shop. She saw Naruto and the girls enter, and smiled. Hey, Naruto, what brings you here? Tenten said, as she got up from her seat. Naruto smiled. I'm here to help these two get outfitted for basic shinobi training, he responded. Tenten looked at Nemu, Isane, and then back at Naruto. Aren't they a little old to start shinobi training? She whispered to Naruto. Naruto looked at Tenten, hopeful. It's fine. Please, can you help me out? Naruto asked, putting his hand together and bowing slightly. It would be much appreciated. Tenten looked at her blonde friend and sighed. Fine, but you owe me for this, she muttered as she started to walk over to Nemu and Isane. Anything, he assured Tenten. Welcome to the Wolf's Den. My name is Tenten and I will be outfitting you in our finest merchandise, Tenten said, smiling. She led them to the ninja clothes in the back. Shall we? Isane smiled. We shall. Tenten led them toward the racks full of clothing. Pick out what you want, and we will see what fits each of you best, she offered. Soon both Nemu and Isane had clothes hanging off their arms. Tenten pushed them both into the dressing room and waved Naruto over. I need you to stand here for a moment, she said, making Naruto wonder what she was up to. Kyuubi on the other hand smiled, knowing exactly what Tenten's plan was, and he had his camera ready. This is going to be great material for the next book, Kyuubi said and giggled perversely. Kit, just relax and enjoy the show, Kyuubi told Naruto. Naruto pondered this with a look of confusion on his face. What do you mean? For the writer of the ICHA series, you're still pretty dense, Kyuubi said with a sigh. Just shut it, Aro Kitsune, Naruto grumbled, but Kyuubi wasn't in the mood to be quiet. It's the truth, Kyuubi replied. You have girls throwing themselves at you, left and right, and you aren't doing anything. You need to get laid, like with that sexy librarian from yesterday. I mean, she was willing. You could have taken her into the back room and had your way with her. You could have written an entirely new book, Ika, Library Dreams. Shut up, Aro Kitsune, Naruto said, blushing, his mind going back to Asa. He shook his head quickly, trying to get the pictures out of his mind. Go for it, Kit, Kyuubi said happily. Do it. I'm not listening, Naruto said and started to think about ramen. No, not ramen, go back to spanking the sexy librarian, Kyuubi whined as he watched the mental pictures in Naruto's head. That's what you get, pervert, Naruto said triumphantly. I hate you so much right now, Kyuubi said and cut the connection. Love you too, Naruto said with a chuckle. Tenten watched as Naruto had suddenly stared off into space and knew he was talking to the fox. Over the years, all of Naruto's friends could tell when he and the fuzzball were talking. He tended to have this blank expression on his face. Once, he was so lost in his thoughts, Kiba had drawn a mustache on his face. Naruto didn't notice and spent the entire day with it on his face. Once he had discovered what had happened, he hunted Kiba down. Everyone in the village could hear his screams. She walked over to Naruto when he seemed to come back to reality. So, what did the furball want? Tenten asked. Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead in frustration. He was being his perverted self again, he answered. It's like, the only thing on his mind is getting me in bed with every hot, single woman. He may be right, you know, Tenten said. Naruto looked at her with shock. Are you serious? Naruto replied. Tenten smiled, looked him directly in the eye. You need someone in your life, not just to have sex, but to love you, she said to him. I can see the loneliness in your eyes when you come to visit Neji and me. You deserve to be happy. Also, a casual relationship never hurt anyone. But, I couldn't do that to anyone, Naruto stammered. Tenten sighed. I know, you and your damn morals, she sighed. Yeah, you and your damn morals, Kyuubi said, cutting into the conversation. Shut up, fuzzball, Naruto blurted out loud, making Tenten laugh. So, it seems Kyuubi agrees with me, she said with a smile. Yeah, Naruto said, sighing. Well, it's up to you what you do, Tenten said, patting him on the shoulder. Naruto just nodded and sighed. I just can't do casual. I know, she said, patting him on the back. If you can't do casual, then I find someone to hook you up with. Naruto stared at Tenten in horror. Please, no, why not? Tenten asked, staring at the pale, ghost-like figure in front of him. The last time someone set me up on a date, I was nearly raped by a fangirl, he said as he shuddered. It was the scariest thing I had ever experienced. Tenten comforted her friend as he rocked back and forth, horrified of fangirls. It's okay, she told him. There were so many, he whispered. He soon calmed down and got up. Okay, I'm better now. That's good, Tenten said with a chuckle. Now, let's get back to the matter at hand. Who are those two? Aren't they a little old to be learning to be Shinanbi? Naruto sighed and replied. They are not from the elemental nation, so they didn't know anything about chakra. They made a deal with the Hokage. They are going to learn shinobi arts, and I am going to learn their techniques. So, you're going to learn something no shinobi can do? Tenten asked, intrigued. Yep, Naruto said, beaming. Tenten punched him in the shoulder. Lucky. Do you know if they have any weapons? Well, they were carrying sword when I found them, Naruto said. What type of swords? Tenten said, transferring into her weapons fangirl mode. Just katanas, Naruto answered and watched as Tenten deflated. Oh well, she said with a sigh. I was hoping for something more exotic. Not this times, my friend, Naruto said. He was about to say something when Isane called out from her dressing room, stating that she needed help. Naruto watched as Tenten walked away and sighed. He wondered what Isane needed, and tried not to picture her half-naked. SB. Orihime sat in class, bored. She looked at the board and couldn't help but think about what was going on back at Urahara's shop. When she was told the Nemu and Isane were missing, she was devastated. After the war, she had become good friends with all of the women in the SWA. She had gotten to know Isane very well. They would talk a lot and laugh together. She and Nemu were pleasant with each other, but Orihime had not gotten to know her as well as Isane. She sat with Naneo and cried for hours upon hearing the news. She wanted to go back and help Urahara try and find them. She prayed that they were safe and hoped they could return soon. The bell soon rang and ended the school day. Orihime smiled to herself and got up, only to be stopped by Yuryu and Chad. Hey Orihime, want to hang out today? Chad asked her. Sorry, guys, got to go to work, she said, heading for the door, only to run into Ichigo. Sorry there, Orihime, he said with a smile. She smiled back at him, a soft blush on her face. It's fine, she said and headed out the door. Is it just me, or is Orihime preoccupied with something? He said as he watched the orange-haired girl disappear in the crowd. Yuryu nodded in agreement. It seems she was in a hurry to go work at Urahara's all day, he said, getting a nod from Chad. She just couldn't seem to sit still, Chad pointed out. I just hope she's okay, Ichigo said and headed out of the classroom. SB. Orihime arrived at the shop in record time and proceeded to head down to the secret training area. As she stepped off the ladder, she noticed Naneo standing by a set of computer screens. She was in charge of watching the monitors and hoped she could see Nemu's and Isane's spiritual pressures. She had yet to find anything inside. She wondered where they could be. It was nerve-wracking, thinking about the horrible things that could have happened to them. Naneo was pulled out of her musing as someone sat down beside her. She turned and saw Orihime there and smiled, happy to see a familiar face. How are you today, Orihime? She asked, a little glad to get a distraction from watching the monitors. Orihime smiled back. I am good, just wanted to get here earlier. I bet, Naneo said with a smile. Ever since they were put to work together they had become very close. So, find them yet? Orihime asked with hope. Naneo sighed and just shook her head. There are still too many spiritual pressures in the world to pinpoint just two. That sucks, Orihime said with a frown. She was eager to find them, but it seemed that this world wasn't going to make it easy. While they talked, Urahara and Mayuri were going over plans on how to find the lieutenants, but it was not going well. It seemed the current captain of Squad 12 and the former were having a disagreement on how to find them. No, I don't think that sending in drones is going to work, Urahara said, rubbing his forehead in frustration. What would happen if one was captured and the signal was traced back to the Soul Society? That's fine, Mayuri stated, waving off Urahara's worry. We'll just program the drones to kill anyone who comes in contact with it, except the lieutenants. We can't do that, Urahara replied. People would notice the deaths. Then what do you propose we do? Mayuri stated. I, for one, am still debating on whether or not to just create 2 new lieutenants. First off, Head captain has told you no to creating new lieutenants, Urahara reminded. Why don't we send in a hell butterfly that will lock onto their spiritual pressures? I tried that, Mayuri stated. There are too many in this world to make it effective. Most of them are lieutenant or higher. Have you tried having them looking for Zanpakuto spirit? Urahara suggested. Wait, Mayuri said. No, I haven't. Then, we have to try that, Urahara decided. Mayuri nodded and started to work on the butterfly. Urahara smiled and sat back watching his clone-looking companion work. At this point, Orihime and Naneo had switched the screen to a large city area that had 5 faces carved on the side of a cliff above the city. They scanned the people but found nothing. There were just so many people. One of the odd things they noticed were the people wearing headbands. They never seemed to walk on the road. They wondered what they were doing. Who do you think they are? Naneo said with wonder. Maybe they're just tired of walking on the road. Orihime said as she went into her thinking pose. Naneo looked at her friend and smiled. Maybe you're right. As they talked, the screen started to beep. This signaled that a match was found. Naneo and Orihime rushed to the screens and looked over every person intently. I found them, Orihime screamed. Urahara and Mayuri hurried over once they heard her scream. As everyone crowded around her screen, Orihime pointed to 3 figures in the crowd. She drew a square around the figures. Enlarge. The figures grew but their faces were still blurry. Enhance. Soon the picture became clearer. Standing there was Isane and Nemu, with a tall blonde man, with 3 whisker marks on each cheek, wearing a headband. Thank Kami. They're okay. Naneo said, as she looked at her friends. Yes, thank Kami, Mayuri stated, with a hint of sadness. He was hoping they wouldn't find them so that he could make a new lieutenant. Urahara smiled. It seems we know where they are now, he said. All we need to do is hone in on their Zanpakutos and they are as good as home. Orihime smiled. That's great. Mayuri looked at them. Yes, we found them, but they will need new homing beacons so we can open the Senkamen. This world seems to not like having us open them at random. And you know this how? Naneo asked. Test of course, Mayuri stated. We can only open a Senkamen at sunrise, noon, and sunset. Also, only one Senkamen can be opened daily. Next, it has to be on the ground, not in the air. Lastly, it has to at least carry a soul. Why is that? Orihime said wondering. I am still testing that, Mayuri stated. It seems that this world is similar to the Soul Society, in that people from the Soul Society will be treated as if they were in the land of the living. It seems that dead souls from the living world would be living souls in that world, even Shinigami. So do you think Nemu and Isane were captured? Naneo said, fearing for her friends. That is a definite possibility, Urahara stated and looked at the picture again. But to me, they seem perfectly happy. No one would let prisoners walk around a city like that, even with an escort. Maybe they are really powerful and even if Nemu and Isane tried to fight they would end up dead or captured. Naneo offered. We won't know, till we contact them, Urahara stated, turning toward his work table. Come on Mayuri, we have a hell butterfly to make. SB. Nemu looked at herself in the mirror. She wore a similar outfit to her Shinigami uniform. She wore a purple short kimono, with a fishnet shirt underneath. On one shoulder she had a shoulder guard that connected to her waist, allowing her to put her Zanpakuto on her back. Next she had fishnets going down her legs and had a pair of shin guards on. Lastly she had a pair of ballet shoes, but these were padded and were lined with a flexible metal allowing for wear and tear. I wonder if this is good, he thought and opened the door. Naruto stood outside the door sitting on a chair. He noticed one of the doors open and turned to look. He blushed as he watched Nemu walk out of the dressing room. He was so enamored with her beauty, the way the short kimono and the fishnets showed of her curves exceptionally well. How do I look? Nemu said with a little blush on her face. Naruto blushed and looked away. You look great. Thank you, she said with a smile and headed back into the dressing room. You are so lucky, Kit, Kyubi said with a smile, having a sexy girl model clothes for you. Maybe you could slowly take them off later. Shut up. I'm not listening to you, pervert, Naruto said, trying not to picture Nemu in his mind. Kyubi wouldn't have it. He started to show pictures of Naruto slowly undressing Nemu into Naruto's mind. Do it, Kit, Kyubi said as he showed more pictures. She wants you. I'm not listening, Naruto said, trying to think of something else, but he couldn't get Nemu off his mind. To him she was beautiful, even though he had known her for only a short while. He could see the pain in her eyes. He knew something had happened to her to make her the way she was, and he wanted to find out what. He wanted to help her and be her friend. Hey Naruto, a voice said, bringing him out of his musing. He turned to see Isane standing over him. She wore a fishnet shirt with a gray halter top over it. On the shoulder was a similar shoulder guard as Nemu. She wore a pair of black cargo pants and had 2 arm guards. Lastly, she wore a pair of black shinobi sandals. Naruto once again blushed madly. Why do Kunoichi look so damn hot, he said to himself. Kit, they're not Kunoichi yet, they're just hot, Kyubi said, and once again Naruto was bombarded with pictures of Isane slowly undressing herself. Can you stop this please? Naruto said, blushing. Just take her now, Kyubi said once again. Please. Go away, you arrow kitsune, Naruto said. Naruto, are you okay? Isane asked as she watched Naruto space out when he saw her walk towards him, a blush still on his face. He smiled and nodded. How do I look? Isane asked him. Naruto just nodded. Well, I think he likes it. I'll get this, she said and went to change. Tenten had just watched the entire scene and couldn't help but laugh at her blonde friend. He was just sitting there nodding his head like an idiot, all because she looked good in her outfit. Men, Tenten said and walked over to him. She waved a hand in front of his face and saw that he was still in a daze. Ikiruka is closing for good. No, Naruto shouted, jumping to his feet, getting weird looks from everyone in the store. He looked around and gave everyone a sheepish expression. Sorry. Tenten fell to the floor and laughed at Naruto. It's not funny, he cried, but Tenten couldn't stop laughing. I'm sorry, but, Tenten began, before she lapsed into a fit of laughter. You suck. You know that, he said. I know I do, but not you, she said, making Naruto go stiff, causing her to laugh even harder. I knew it, Kyubi shouted. Why didn't you get this one when you had the chance? You're not helping, Naruto told Kyubi. He turned to Tenten and sighed. You done yet? Tenten slowly stopped laughing and got up. Yeah, I'm good. Glad I could make your day, he said with a weak smile. Tenten smiled. So am I, she said and headed to the main counter. Nemu and Isane walked towards the main counter, oblivious as to what had transpired between the two friends. They were both still dressed in their respective outfits. Naruto noticed this and blushed but managed to hide it better than when he first saw them. Tenten watched this reaction and a plan started to form in her mind. It seems I need to get everyone together for a Naruto meeting, she thought to herself. She was brought out of her musing when she saw Naruto waving a hand in front of her face. Yes, she said, coming out of her thoughts. I want to purchase at least 5 pairs of each outfit, Naruto said as Tenten started to write down the order. Next I need 1000 shuriken, 600 kunai, 600 explosive tags, and 2 sets of basic sealing scrolls. Tenten took down the entire order and went to the register. Soon she had the bill. It's going to be 58,282 yen. Naruto just nodded and pulled out his wallet. Upon taking out 100,000 yen bill, he hands it to Tenten. Is that enough? Of course, Tenten smiled as she made change. She gave him his change and proceeded to head into the back and pull from the shelves all of the bought items. It took her a bit to get everything, but soon everything was sealed and ready to go. She set the sealed scrolls on the counter and smiled. Is there anything else I can get you? Naruto handed her a piece of paper and smiled. Send the usual amount, he said as he picked up the sealed scrolls and headed out the door. Tenten watched them leave and smiled. This is going to be interesting. I've got to call the others, she said, heading into the back of the store to start on Naruto's custom order. SB. Naruto led Nemu and Isane back toward his home. He dropped off their supplies and told them to get their swords. Meet me in the back when you're ready, he said, heading outside. Nemu and Isane both nodded and headed up the stairs to get their Zanpakutos. I wonder why he wants us to get our Zanpakuto, Isane said as they walked. We won't know till we get outside, Nemu replied and grabbed her blade from her closet. They soon had them strapped to their backs and headed out to the training ground in the back. They saw Naruto sitting in the middle of the grounds, meditating. Nemu noticed that he was pulling the Raryoku and another Angry from the air and plants around him. How is he doing that? She thought. Not many people could pull such large amounts of Raryoku from around them, yet here was Naruto, doing it as if it were the easiest thing in the world. What is he? Glad to see you guys made it here quickly, Naruto said, opening his eyes and letting the nature chakra leave his body. He stood up and walked over to them. First thing we need to do is see what level of combat you guys are at before we begin your training. Why is that? Isane asked. I need to see what areas we need to improve on, in your training in being shinobi, Naruto replied. Okay then, Isane said with a smile. Great, Naruto responded. First things first, I am going to spar with each of you individually. First up is Nemu. Isane nodded and took a step back. Naruto walked to the other side of the field and smiled. Shall we begin? Yes, let's, Nemu said, getting into her stance. She stood with her legs bent and her hands held in front of her, guarding her face. Naruto stood on the other side in a very relaxed stance. Hey, Nemu, a word of advice, come at me with the intent to kill, Naruto said with a grin. Nemu nodded and shot forward at a great speed. She cocked her fist and threw a straight right at Naruto, only for him to block with his forearm and counter with a left hook. Nemu quickly turned to her side dodging the punch and brought her left first down towards his side. He countered her once again and threw another left hook. Nemu jumped back and let the punch go wide. This caused him to get off balance. She saw an opening and took it. She rushed forward and brought her left leg into a side kick into his right side, only for him to grab her leg and pull her close. Before she could react, he kneed her hard in the stomach, making her gasp for breath. He proceeded to put his left foot behind her leg and made her fall to the ground, hard. He quickly let go of her leg and brought a straight right to her face. Nemu rolled to the side and jumped up. She kicked him in the side, making him skid a few feet away. He got up quickly and shot forward. He threw a wide left and Nemu dodged, only to be hit in the face by a punch. She flew back a few feet only to see two Narutos standing in front of her. I said, come at me with the intent to kill, the real Naruto reminded, as the duo charged forward. She wondered when he had had time to make a clone, but this thought was forgotten as she dodged their attacks. As she dodged to the side from one attack, she was hit in the side by the other. Soon it became a one-sided fight as the two Narutos pummeled Nemu into the ground. Damn, she thought as she tried to put some distance between her and the two Narutos. She could tell that if she held back anymore, he would actually beat the crap out of her. She saw no other option and stood ready for his next attack. Naruto noticed the change in Nemu's attitude and smiled. She's finally taking this seriously, he said with a smile and watched in wonder as she began to spin her hands quickly. Let's continue, shall we? She said in a flat voice and charged forward, faster than before. She threw a strike to Naruto's face, only for him to block. Naruto thought at first he gotten off easy only to feel intense pain in his forearm. He jumped back and looked at his arm. He could see that Nemu's attack acted like a drill, and if he wanted to stay in one piece he would have to keep his distance. Your taijutsu is excellent, Nemu, Naruto said with a smile as he pulled out 2 kunai from his pouch. But, let's see how you cope with a few futon justice. Futon? Nemu wondered, only to feel a change in the air around her. She turned to see what was going on and noticed the air gathering around the blades in Naruto's hands. Futon. Wind blades, Naruto said and swung one of his kunai. Nemu felt a change in the wind and quickly dodged to the side. She looked to where she had previously stood and saw a large cut going toward the treeline. Good reflexes, Naruto said with a smile. He proceeded to send more blades of wind her way, causing Nemu to simply dodge each strike. Damn, can't get close to him, Nemu thought as she dodged another wind blade. She landed and put her hands together. Hado number 4 Byakurai, Nemu said and pointed 2 fingers at Naruto. Naruto watched as she sent a blast of pale-looking lighting towards him. He quickly flashed a few hand signs and countered with futon, wind wall. The lighting clashed with the wind and was countered. How did he counter that? Nemu thought as she tried to get in close. Naruto looked at her and smiled. He rushed forward and met her attack with his own. She tried to punch him in the gut only for him to sidestep and try and kick her in the side. Nemu blocked as best she could but was still sent back a few feet by the momentum of the kick. Naruto pressed his attack and soon had Nemu pinned to the ground with a kunai to her neck. I win, he whispered in her ear, making her blush. He got up and helped her to her feet with a smile. You did great. Now it's Isane's turn. Nemu nodded and went to the sidelines. She was mad about losing, but from what she had experienced, Naruto was very skilled at fighting. He could adapt very quickly to something new and found a way to counter it. She wondered why her Kido was blocked so simply and vowed to find out what had happened. Isane had watched the battle in wonder. Naruto had fought Nemu on equal ground even when both were holding back their true power. I wonder how powerful you really are, she thought as she took her place on the training field. Ready when you are, Isane said. Naruto nodded. He shot forward and threw a left hook. Isane dodged and tried to punch Naruto back, only for him to block and counter with a right. As they battled, Naruto noticed that Isane's taijutsu was fairly average and she couldn't keep up with someone of his caliber. He jumped back and watched her. Isane sighed, thankful for the break. He was just too good for her Hakuda. She knew he had her beat at that, so she decided to see how he would deal with kiddos. Hado number 4 Byakurai, she said and sent a blast of lighting at Naruto. He dodged to the side only to see Isane prepare another spell, Hado number 31 Shakuho. A ball of red energy flew towards Naruto. Damn, Naruto said and dodged to the side, only to get caught in the shockwave. As he got up, he suddenly felt his arms bind together. He turned and saw Isane as she said Bakudo number 1 Sai. Naruto dodged to the side as she drew her katana and brought it down onto him. Naruto saw that his arms were bound by spiritual part of chakra and pumped his chakra, breaking the binding. Dang, I should have known it wouldn't hold, she thought to herself as she felt her blade clash against Naruto's kunai. He pressed his attack and kept as close to her as possible, not giving her time to pull off any more of those strange just you. Isane was getting very tired and knew she couldn't keep it up for long. She jumped back and raised her hand. I yield, she said as she sat down on the ground. Naruto nodded and sat down next to her. Good job, he stated. Those strange justice caught me off guard. Those aren't just you. They're kiddos, Isane corrected. What are kiddos? Naruto asked in wonder. We'll teach you later, Isane said as she laid down. Just let me rest. Naruto smiled and picked her up, bridal style, much to her amazement. What are you doing? She stammered as he walked her back to the house, with Nemu right behind. You said you were tired. Just being a good friend, Naruto said with a smile, causing Isane to blush. Nemu watched this and felt a tad of envy. She secretly hoped she was in his arms instead of Isane. SB. The research groups had soon found Nemu and Isane's Zanpakuto spirits and were currently monitoring what the pair was up to. They had watched the fight between the pair of lieutenants and the blonde that was with them earlier and were amazed by the skills he displayed. He seemed to be able to make copies of himself as well as control wind, but was amazed the group the most, was that it seemed that he was holding back as well. Even though both lieutenants were also holding back, he was able to make them get serious and he wasn't even trying. What is he? Orihime asked with wonder. He reminded her of Ichigo in terms of fight potential, but he seemed to be a lot happier than her orange-haired friend. I don't know, but it would be great to study him, Mayuri said with a huge grin on his face. I would have to agree with you on that, Urahara agreed, wanting to know more about his powers. I would rather know why he was fighting Nemu and Isane. Naneo interjected. Was it to test their strength or to show them who's superior? I really don't know, Urahara said. But we won't know till we send someone there. I will go, Naneo offered. I want to get them back as soon as possible. Mayuri smiled. I am glad you feel that way, but it will take time to make another Senkaman to go there, he stated. Then we better get started, Urahara said. Excuse me, Orihime said, getting everyone attention. I want to go as well. What? Everyone said in unison. Orihime, what do you mean you want to go to that world? Naneo asked in shock. It's too dangerous. I can't just sit here and do nothing. Orihime said as tears started to fall down her face. All I have ever done is nothing. Not when we recused Rukia, and Winter War, I did nothing. I want to help, please let me help. The others looked at the crying girl and could feel her pain. She was tired of being helpless. Fine, you can go, Urahara said, causing everyone to gasp in surprise. Really? Orihime asked, surprised. Urahara nodded. Yes, really, but you have to train first. He said. I will train hard, she said with determination. Good, he said and turned towards Mayuri. How long till you can get a Senkaman ready? At least a month, Mayuri said. Then we have a month to prepare, Urahara said. He looked at Orihime and gave her a very serious look. You are going to be put through hell, you know that, right? Yes, I know, Orihime said as she wiped the tears from her eyes, but I want to help and I will try my hardest to do it. That's what I need to hear, Urahara said with a smile. Let's begin, shall we? SB. Naruto sat in front of Nemu and Isane. He looked them over and planned their training regime. For Nemu, he planned on a light workout in the morning, next was weapon throwing, and after that he would have her build her chakra reserves. For Isane, he noted to work on her taijutsu. She had a good foundation, but she need to get into a style that fit her fighting style. He was going to start her off with the same light workout as Nemu, then weapon practice, followed by building her reserves, and ending with helping her make her with her taijutsu. While he planned their training, Nemu and Isane were planning his. They say that he was a well-rounded fighter and could adapt to things very quickly. His reflex and senses were top-notch, rivaling that of the captains. They planned to start with him gather the Raryoku from his surrounding before they started him on kiddos. Naruto was the first to break the silence. Okay, I think we are ready to get started, he said with a smile, getting a nod from the girls. First off, I have to say you're both are well-trained warriors and it was fun to spar with you. He turned towards Nemu. Now I going to give you my evaluation of your current fighting strength. First off, we'll start with Nemu. Okay, she replied and he nodded. First off, your taijutsu is superb, he said with a smile. The way you got your hand to spin like a drill was amazing. Is it a Kekkei Genki? Kekkei Genkai? Isane asked. It's a bloodline, a gene in your blood that allows you to do things other can't, Naruto explained with a smile. Oh, then no, Nemu said, it was more of built into me by my father. What do you mean built? Naruto said, getting a little angry. Exactly what it means, Nemu said as if didn't matter. My father modified my body to do things other can't. Naruto nodded, barely able to control his anger. There another bastard out there that does that stuff. He yelled, mentally thinking of a dead snake. Nemu noticed the anger building in Naruto's eyes and was concerned. Are you okay? She asked, getting his attention. Yeah, just fine, he said, brushing off the question, just remembering something I rather not. Oh, Nemu replied and wondered why her modification made him mad. Was it that he didn't think she was human? Anyway, back to what I was saying, Naruto finally said, pulling Nemu out of her thoughts. Your Tai Justice is great, it high Chunin low Jonin level. After that, you have great battle awareness. I wondered why you didn't draw your blade though. I have no use for it. Nemu simply stated, my fists are all I need to defeat someone. I see, he replied. Overall you about a Chunin level in skill, but that probably not your true level of skill. How do you know that? Nemu asked with curiosity. I have my methods, he said with a smile. Sure you do, Nemu said, making him smile. Anyway, onto Isane, he said and looked at the silver-haired girl. First off, we will start with your taijutsu. It is average, and you have a solid foundation that can be built upon, so we can work on that. Your blade work is great and your use of justice was good as well. Justice? She asked, wondering what he was talking about. Those numbered attacks you sent at me. He said. Oh, you mean Kido? She replied. Yeah, that. He said. I have to say you're about the same level as Nemu, but yet again that is not an accurate assessment of your skills. Nemu and Isane looked at him in wonder. Not only had he accurately judges their strength, but he also could see that they were hiding their true strength as well, but also he was hiding his true skills as well. So what do you mean by Chunin level? Nemu asked. She had read the basic on shinobi but still didn't have an accurate reading on their skills. Oh yeah, sorry. He stated. There are a few levels of shinobi. The first is genin. They are rookie shinobi who have just graduated the academy and had just joined the shinobi force. They usually only know the basic academy justice and what their family had taught them, and they are from a clan. Next we have chunin. They are the next rank up, and they have more experience than genin and usually have higher skills as well. Next, we have jonin. They are the best of the best in the regular shinobi forces, and they have many skills and usually teach the genin. After that we have Anbu, they are the special forces. They have been trained to be the best of the best. Above them is Kage and Senin. These two levels are the hardest to achieve. They are master of many different shinobi skills as are feared by many. The Kages run the villages while the Senin protect the village from outside threats by doing things outside the village. Thank you for the explanation, Nemu said. So we are Chunin level. That was my assessment, but you were holding back, so you are probably higher. He said. What level are you at? Isane asked. Naruto stood up and headed to the house, leaving them without an answer, when he suddenly turned around and gave them a smile. I am a Senin. He said and headed inside. Isane and Nemu sat there in silence. What? The both shouted at the same time. SB. Orihime sat at her desk in annoyance. She was in class but she rather be training with Urahara for the mission. After they decided that she was allowed to go, Urahara sent her out to buy training clothes and other things she would need for training. It had been 2 days since then and she hadn't started. She had gotten very annoyed at this and wanted to get going. She didn't want to be useless anymore. Finally the bell rang and she rushed out the door. Yuryu, Chad, and Ichigo watched as she zoomed out of the room at super speed. What's with her? Chad asked in wonder. I have no idea, Yuryu said. Same, Ichigo said. While the three bewildered boys tried to figure out what was going on, Orihime had made it to Urahara's shop. She made her way to the back room and changed into a purple Under Armour shirt, with black sweatpants. Alright, I am ready, she said with determination. Let's get stronger. She headed out of the back room only to trip on the doorframe and fall to the ground. Owie, she said and got up. Let's try that again, she muttered and went down to the secret drawing grounds. As she touched the ground, she saw Urahara and Yoruichi standing a few feet from the ladder. Welcome back, Urahara said with a smile. Are you ready to train? Yes, Orihime said with conviction. Urahara smiled. Good. Now let's get started. He walked deeper into the training grounds and Orihime followed close behind. They stopped in a large clearing and he turned to face his new student. First things first. We are going to start with strength and speed building exercise, he said. Now Yoroichi will be helping you on this. Orihime nodded and faced the purpled hair beauty with determination in her eyes. Yoroichi looked at her with a smile. Let's start the tour. I mean training started. Okay. Orihime said with convince. First you have to run 30 laps around this clearing. Yoroichi stated and Orihime nodded and began to run. Yet she soon tripped after a few feet only to get back up once again. This kept happening and soon she was covered in bruises after 3 laps, but she kept on running. Soon the laps began to grow and Yoroichi watched with a grin at Orihime's sheer determination, but alas her body didn't have the same will as her heart and she soon collapsed after 22 laps. She tried to get up but her body was too tired. Yoroichi noticed this and walked over to her. Good job, she said to the tired girl, you made 22 laps, that was more than I was expecting. Keep going. Orihime huffed as she tried to breath. No you can't, Yoroichi said looking at Orihime. You need to rest a bit, we have more things to do. Orihime just nodded and laid on the ground for a few more minutes. She picked herself up off the ground and walked over to Yoroichi. Okay, next give me 60 sit-ups. Yoroichi ordered and Orihime set to her task. SB. It had been 10 days since Orihime had started her training and she was excelling at everything. After the first days of training her body began to adjust to the strain and soon she could complete the entire workout after 5 days. Yoroichi, satisfied with her progress, had added hand-to-hand combat to her training. She had started Orihime out with the basic stances and made her go through each stance 100 times every day. Now she stood in front of her teacher in her stance waiting for her to attack. This is to see if you go it down. Yoroichi said and charged forward. She threw a kick towards Orihime's side only to have Orihime lift her leg to block. Orihime leaned forward and launched a hard right to Yoroichi's face. Yoroichi dodged it with a tilt of her head and threw a knee towards Orihime's stomach. Orihime brought her hands together and pushed of the knee to get some distance. She had little time to settle in when Yoroichi was on her again. Orihime was once again of the defensive and blocked most of Yoroichi's strikes, but she couldn't keep it up for long. She dropped her guard and was hit at the gut, sending all the air out of her body, causing her to slump of the ground in pain. Yoroichi looked down on the girl with a sigh. You need to learn to take a punch like that, she said. People in a fight won't be merciful and use this to their advantage. Orihime heard this but didn't acknowledge that she heard. She was still trying to regain her breaths. Yoroichi sighed and walked towards the ladder. I see you upstairs, she said. Orihime laid there for a few minutes before slowly got up off the ground. She stumbles a bit but headed towards the ladder. I will get stronger, she thought to herself as she walked. SB. Isane watched as Naruto and Nemu sparred. They had started their training a few days ago and he had them spar with him every day. She sighed. Even though they have been training for a few days, she was so tired. Even when she went to the academy she was never this tired. Her days went as follows: get up and eat a breakfast, then meet Naruto in the back for training. He had them start a light workout, which consisted of 30 laps around the training grounds, 100 push-up, 100 sit-up, 250 crunches and leg lifts, but he had her throw 100 punches per arm, and 200 kicks per leg. After that it was on to chakra training. He had given them each a leaf and told them to keep it in place on their foreheads using on chakra. He told them they had to figure out how to draw the chakra to their foreheads. At first they couldn't seem to do it and Naruto just watched with a bowl of ramen in hand. Nemu got it after 2 days, but sadly Isane had not. She watched the leaf drop again and shouted out in frustration, why is this so damn hard? She said and sat down on the ground with a huff. Naruto saw this and walked over to her. You get it? He said and sat down next to her. You just need to practice. That's what I doing, but I can't get it to work, Isane said with a sigh. You just have to draw it out. He said and thought for a moment. I want you to mediate with me right now. Okay. Isane replied and got into her meditative pose. Naruto saw this and smiled. Okay, first I want you to relax and clear your mind. He watched her for a few moments before speaking again. Next I want you to focus on looking inward. Try to feel the flow of your chakra through your body. Choose one spot and follow the chakra all around till it comes back to that point. Isane nodded slightly and focused. She could feel power flowing through her body, not her resetsu but something else. Something more, it flowed all over her body. From her head to her feet she could feel the flow. She chose a spot on the tip of her fingers and followed the flow of her chakra. As she followed it she could feel that she could control it, all she needed to do was focus and it would do what she wanted. She opened her eyes and saw Naruto staring at her with a smile on his face. Did that help? He asked. Yes, Isane said with a smile. Great. Naruto said and stood up. Try the exercise again and let me know how it goes. Isane nodded and picked up a leaf. She cleared her mind and felt the flow and focused it to a point on her forehead. She placed the leaf and let go, it stayed in place. It'd been 2 months since they had arrived in this world and both Nemu and Isane had grown stronger than they ever thought they would. They both mastered the leaf balancing exercise after the first week and he had them move on to tree walking. It was a painful experience at first. When he had first shown them they were wide-eyed. They had woke up that morning and looked for him only to find a note telling them to follow a rope on the ground. They ended up in a clearing with large trees all around. They looked around and couldn't see Naruto and wondered where he was. Yo, said a voice from above and they looked up to see Naruto looking down at them standing on a tree branch upside down. Nemu looked at him in shock. How was he doing that? She had seen new Soul Reapers could stand in the air but they could never seem to stick to things like Naruto was doing. How is that possible? Isane said with wide eyes. Naruto smiled and walked down the tree, surprising the pair even more. Simple, I just focus my chakra to the bottom of my feet and use it to stick to the surface of objects. He stepped on the ground and smiled. Now you two are going to try. He threw 2 kunai into the ground and smiled. Use these to mark your progress and I've been over there sleeping. He said and walked away. Since that day the pair had worked on the exercise every day. Isane made it higher than Nemu but Nemu was able to stick on longer. The pair looked at each other determined to make it to the top. Orihime went through her stances as quickly as possible. It had been over half a month since she started training and she was becoming a proficient fighter. She had added her shield to her fighting style allowing her to trap her opponents and stopping their movements. She was currently going through her basic waiting on Urahara to come and start the next part of her training. Well, it seems that you have improved greatly. He said with a smile. Orihime stopped and faced him with a smile. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your or Yoroichi's help. Well, I say it now, time to step it up. He said with a smile. We are going to make it so you can make pinpoint shields instead of just one huge one. This will allow you to block as well as move at the same time instead of staying in one place. Okay, Orihime said with a smile and got ready to start the training. That's what I wanted to hear. Urahara said and walked over to a crate filled with tennis balls. No, remember the point is to create small shields that block the ball while you are still moving. Yes, she said and jumped to the side of as a ball sailed past. She summoned her fairies and soon they started their training. Naruto stood next to Isane and Nemu and smiled. They had mastered tree walking after 2 weeks. He was happy for their progress and planned on teaching them the 3 basic academy justice. Nemu was happy with her progress and felt that Naruto was a very good teacher. He was always helping them when they had question or were feeling frustrated. He never said anything hurtful and always encouraged them to get better. Okay ladies, today we are going to learn of the 3 basic academy justice, Naruto said with a smile. It is Kawarimi no Jutsu, or body replacement justice. This will allow you to substitute yourself with something in case you get attacked. He went through the hand signs and said, Kawarimi no Jutsu, and he was replaced by a log. This is good when you need to get out of a jam quickly. He said and smiled. He was glad he had them go over the hand signs when they started. Now I want you to try. The both nodded and Nemu decided to go first. She went through the hand signs and said, Kawarimi no Jutsu, and she was covered in smoke. It cleared and they saw her still standing there with a splintered log all around her. Okay, you put too much power into it. He said. Let's try that again, shall we? They continued to practice the just you for the rest of the day, but they had yet to do it correctly. As they headed to the house, Naruto gave them an encouraging smile. You get it, he said happily. It took me a while to learn how to do it, so don't be discouraged. Thanks, Isane said with a smile. It's just so hard. Well, it's new to you. Naruto said, it will take a while for you to be comfortable to use this power, so just keep practicing and you get it. Thanks, Naruto, Isane said and Nemu nodded in agreement. Glad to be of service, he said. Now shall we stay in or go out to eat? SB. Naruto stood on his roof looking at the stars. It had been 2.5 months since he started Nemu's and Isane's ninja training. He was happy at their progress but began to wonder when they were going to start his trying. They kept telling him they were still trying to figure out the best way to teach him. Therefore, he let them plan while he worked on his newest edition of Ika Ika. After he made sure he was happy with what he wrote, he sat down and began to gather nature chakra. While this was going on, Kyuubi planned to mess with his blonde host and started to send mental pictures of Nemu and Isane doing very indecent things with Naruto. As soon as the pictures entered Naruto's mind, he had a trouble concentrating. Stop it, you baka fox. Naruto said mentally as he tried to get his concentration back. Kyuubi smiled and upped his attack. Come on kid, you know you want to do that. Just admit it and then go do it. I not am listening to you. Naruto replied and went back to his meditation, but Kyuubi wasn't done yet. Kid, listen to me, Kyuubi said. I've been around for a long time and trust me when I say this, you need to get some and soon. I mean you just sitting there doing nothing when beautiful women are throwing themselves at you. Come on man, jump their bones. I'm not going to. Naruto retorted back with frustration. But you want to? Kyuubi asked with a grin. Of course I want to, Naruto answered back and blushed in embarrassment. I knew it, Kyuubi shouted. It's okay kid. All you need to do is go to a few towns over, hit the brothel and just have fun. I will not, I am not like that. Naruto said back. I am not a pervert. Say the writer of Ika Ika. Kyuubi replied with a smile. That's different, Naruto said. Sure it is. Kyuubi said, you write a serious story with plot and only a little smut, but it is very detailed smut. I mean kid, some of the stuff you come up with sound like way too much fun. Whatever arrow kitsune, Naruto shouted back and cut the connection. He can't deny it forever. Kyuubi said with a laugh, and when he does I will have my camera and popcorn ready, haha jaha ha 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 ha. Naruto sighed and stopped meditating. He had a lot on his mind. He couldn't deny that Kyuubi was right about him needing someone. Not just to sleep with but to spend his life with. Yet life was cruel to the young sage. He was the most powerful shinobi, but he was also the loneliest. He could never find someone who could fill that part of his life. Soon his thoughts turned to his 2 new roommates. He started to picture what life would be like if he was with either of him. He pictured himself married to Nemu. She was wearing a light purple kimono with blue lilies all over. They walked to the part, a young girl with dark black hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks on her face. She pulled the pair forward with a smile. Come on, she said with a smile, I want to go to the swings. Can you push me, daddy? Naruto smiled as he pictured this in his mind. He could see their smiling faces and couldn't help smile. Next he pictured himself with Isane. They were at the beach holding hands. She wore a very flattering bathing suit that showed her body of well. It was silver and was very low cut. It went all the way down to her navel. He wore a simple pair of blue and orange swimming trunks. A young boy with silver hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks on his face ran ahead of the pair. "Daddy, Mommy, look what I found," he said, holding up a large seashell. Naruto continued switching between the two and soon tears start to fall down his face. Why couldn't he have a family of his own? Soon he was sobbing in silence, wondering what it would be like to be a father. Suddenly the sound of footsteps filled the air and he turned to see Nemu standing behind him. She saw him and noticed the tears in his eye. She saw the loneliness in his eyes and she walked over to him. She sat down next to him, and put a hand on his shoulder. "I heard that you up here and was wondering if you were okay," she asked, worried for the blonde. Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and gave her a small smile. "I'm fine," he said as he tried to stop the tears from flowing. "Then why are you crying?" she asked him with concern. Naruto looked up at the sky and replied, "Just letting out some pent-up feelings, that all." "Which feelings?" she asked. "Nothing important," he said and looked at her with a forced smile. She could tell he was trying to be happy for her benefit, but she wanted to know what was troubling the blonde. "That's a lie," she replied. "It that obvious," he said as he looked down. "You are easy to read," she said as she scooted closer to him. "Will you please tell me what's wrong? I want to help." Naruto was silent for a moment, deciding on whether or not to tell her. He was silent for a few more minutes before answering, "I just tired of being alone," he finally said. "All my life I've been alone. I never met my parents. They died on the night Kyuubi attacked." "Kyuubi? Oh right, the giant demon fox," she said as remembered reading about the attack in the history book. "Yeah, but what most people don't know is that the fourth didn't kill the Kyuubi, he sealed it inside someone," he said as he tells his tale. "That person was me." "You have the fox sealed inside of you," Nemu said in shock. "How could they seal something that was supposedly one of the most powerful things in existence into Naruto?" "Yeah, thanks to him I was always alone for most of my childhood," Naruto continued. "It was only when I entered the Shinobi Academy did I stop being alone. Soon after I graduate I made more and more friends and even got Ka-san, but I am still alone." "Why's that?" Nemu asked. Naruto turned and stared into her eyes. "No one can truly love a Jinchuriki." Nemu could see that he was tired of being alone, but she didn't know what to do. She was a modified mod soul with a body she didn't know how to react. As she tried to decide what she needed to do, her body moved on its own. She wrapped her arms around the blonde and pulled him close to her. "You're not alone," she said finally. "You have Isane and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon." As she said this, she knew she meant every word. She wanted to stay with him, even though she had only known him for only 2.5 months. She knew in her heart that she wanted to be with him and only him. She didn't want to go back to the Soul Society and be with her abusive father. She wanted to be with this man in her arms. "Really?" Naruto asked in shock. Nemu gives him a loving smile. "Every word," she said and leans in and captures his lips. Naruto was surprised at first but soon returned the kiss. Nemu descended into his arms and they held each other in a loving embrace. They broke the kiss and stared into each other's eyes. They were together pure and simple and nothing was going to change that. She was his and he was hers. Nemu looked at Naruto and pulled him close. She felt his warmth. She was at felt his peace. No one could hurt her here. He, Mayuri, couldn't hurt her as long as she was in his arms. Nothing else mattered to her anymore. It started slowly at first. She watched the blonde simply to gather more information on shinobi and their skills. Yet as he trained her and Isane, she could see the warmth he gave to them. He never yelled or hit them for doing something wrong. He never treated them as if they were nothing. He made her feel like a person, not like an experiment. I love you, she whispered to him. You made me feel like a person. Before I met you, my father treated me like nothing. He would hit me and abuse me, even experimenting on me. I was so alone then I could do anything to stop him. Tears started to flow down her face as she let out all her pent-up feelings. Naruto held her tightly in his arms. He wanted to kill her father. He was worse than the damn snake. He hurt her just because he wanted to see what would happen. I kill him, he told himself as he looked at his princess. He will never touch a hair on her head again. He put his hand on her chin and pointed her eyes towards him. That doesn't matter now. He said, you are here and I won't let anyone take you. He leaned in and captured her lips. They kissed, letting their loneliness fade away into the night. SB. Orihime was once again sitting in class waiting for the school day to be over. It had been less than half a day since she completed her training. She was very happy with her improvement and couldn't wait to show everyone she wasn't just good for healing. Her friends had noticed the change in her over the past few weeks and wondered what had happened to give her this air of confidence she now had. As the bell rang for the end of the school day, Orihime was cornered by most of her friends. Hi guys, what's up? She said with her usual bubbly smile. Hey Orihime. They all greeted and soon Yuryu was the first to speak up. We noticed something different about you recently. He started. We were wondering what was going on. Orihime looked at them and smiled. Well, I am helping Mr. Urahara on a really important project. What this project? Chad asked. Orihime looked at them. Sorry, I can't. Mr. Urahara told me not to tell anyone about the specific of the project. He said I could say I was helping with the project but I couldn't give out the specifics about it. She said with a smile. She pushed past the group and headed down the hall. I'm late, I have to go. Her friends watched as she disappeared down the hall and all looked majorly confused. We heading to Urahara's? Ichigo asked, getting a nod from everyone. Then let's go. Later at Urahara's, Orihime was once again in the secret training area waiting on teachers. Soon Urahara and the rest of the staff came down and stood by her. Well, it seems we have reached the moment to see if you're ready to go on this little adventure or not. Urahara said with a smile, you will be face Hunta and Ururu. If you defeat them you're more than ready to go. Orihime nodded. I reject, she said, and her fairies fly out and around her. Let's do this. Urahara nodded as Hunta and Ururu walked over to face Orihime. Hunta smiled and started to stretch while Ururu stood silently and waited for him to finish. I going to beat you so bad, Hunta said with a wide smile, for I am the great Hunta can do anything. Hunta, we hurt her too much. Ururu said. I know that, Hunta said with a sigh, I just wanted to say that. Can we get started? Orihime asked. Oh sorry, Hunta said, then rushed forward bringing his bat for a wide swing. Orihime dodged the swing and tripped Hunta with her foot. She then dodged to the side avoiding a rocket attack from Ururu. Orihime kept dodging as well as making pinpoint shields to block the ones she couldn't dodge. She rushed towards Ururu and threw a punch making the girl drop her launcher and move to the side. Ururu countered with a straight punch to Orihime's side only to be blocked by a shield. Using this to her advantage, Orihime tapped Ururu lightly on the forehead before moving away. Come on, take us seriously. Hunta said, getting angry. But I don't want to hurt you. Orihime stated. You are going to have to hurt people if you go, Urahara stated. You can't just tape them on the head and expect them to go down. Life isn't like that, so if you're going you have to show the resolve to do what is need to survive. Orihime looked at Urahara and knew he was right. If she got into a fight she couldn't go lightly on them, it was fight or die. Yet she couldn't do it, she couldn't hurt them, it wasn't in her nature. It's either them or you. Urahara stated simply. So choose now, will you stand by and let other fight or will you stand up and fight for yourself? Orihime knew what she had to do and got in her stance. Seeing this as the signal to start their attack, Hunta rushed in and brought his bat down on Orihime once again. This time his bat was stopped by her shield before he felt a fist collide with his gut. This sent him flying back a few feet. Ururu started to fire her rockets at Orihime. Orihime dodged most of them and used her shields to block the rest. She charged forward determined to show her resolve. She grabbed Ururu's rocket launcher and then pulled in forward, causing the girl to bend over and get kneed in the gut. Soon the sound of clapping could be heard and Orihime turned to see Urahara clapping. "Well done," he said as he walked over to his two downed shopkeepers. "You're ready." "Thank you," she said and smiled. She cast one of her shield over the downed pair. "Let me help them." Urahara smiled. "It's just fine," he said and walked back towards the shop as Orihime headed Junta and Ururu. SB. Isane woke as the sun came trot the window. She turned and saw Nemu wasn't in her bed and wondered where her friend was. She shrugged it off and headed to the bathroom ready to start the day. She must be training, she told herself as she turned on the shower. How wrong she was. Nemu was currently snuggled into Naruto's chest. They had spent the entire night in each other's arms. Nemu was the first to wake and looked to see Naruto holding her close. She closed her eyes and leaned into him, happy for the first time in a long time. The sun hit Naruto's face, causing him to stir. He opened his eyes slowly and looked down at Nemu. He started to freak out that she was in his bed, but soon the memories of the other night came to mind, causing him to smile. "My Heim," he whispered as he looked at her. "My night," she said back, causing Naruto to blush. He thought she was still asleep. "So what shall we do today?" Naruto asked as he pulled her closer to him. Nemu wrapped her arms around him and smiled. "Stay like this," she said. "That sounds great," he said and pulled her close, but then both of their stomach growled. They looked at each other and started to laugh. "I guess we might as well get up," Naruto said and got out of bed only for Nemu to pull him down and kiss him. She kissed him before getting out of bed. "Now we can get up," she said and headed out of his room. With Isane. Isane stepped out of the shower and dried herself off with her towel. She stepped out into the hall only to step back into the bathroom again. She watched as Nemu stepped out of Naruto's room. She watched her friend head back to their room and wondered what was going on. She watched as Naruto stepped out of his room a few minutes later with a large smile on his face. This wasn't his usual smile. This one was a joyous smile. What happened between those two? She thought and headed back to her room to change. She entered the room and found Nemu changing into her training clothes. She walked past it but couldn't help but notice the change in her demeanor. She seemed more open. She looked like she had found something that had been lost to her for a long time. Isane started to change and watched Nemu. "Hey Nemu," she finally said, getting the other lieutenant's attention. "Yes Isane," Nemu replied, wondering what was going on. "Are you okay?" Isane asked, catching Nemu off guard with that question. "Yes, why do you ask?" Nemu replied, wondering where Isane's line of thinking was coming from. "Well, it feels like you've changed," Isane said, gathering her thoughts. "It's like you found something you've been missing." Nemu looked at Isane for a moment before her thoughts turned towards their blonde caretaker. She blushed and said, "It seems that way." Before Isane could ask any more, Nemu had already headed out of the room and down the stairs. She had noticed the blush on Nemu's face when she had replied to her question. Then she remembered the smile of Naruto's face. Have they gotten together? She thought to herself and rushed down the stairs. She turned and headed towards the kitchen only to stop when she saw Nemu and Naruto kissing. "Oh my," Isane said and watched the two break apart. Naruto was the first to notice her standing there. "Surprise," he said with a sheepish smile. "I'm sorry," Isane said and turned around and headed into the living room, a blush spread across her face. Naruto was about to head after the silver-haired girl only to be stopped by Nemu. "I talked to her," she said and headed after her friend. Naruto just nodded and continued to cook. Nemu looked all around and found Isane sitting on the couch in the living room, a blush still spread across her face. "I sorry you had to find out that way," Nemu said, sitting down next to Isane. Isane looked at her friend and sighed. It's fine, it just unexpected. She said. I mean, you have never shown interest in any guy before back home. Nemu looked at Isane. They couldn't understand my loneliness. Nemu said, catching Isane's attention. They could never feel what I have felt, they could never feel it. Nemu, Isane started to say, but she was cut off. Naruto has felt the same pain as I have. She said, trying to hold back her tears. He has felt what I have felt, yet he hasn't fallen to it. He stands tall and moves forward, he doesn't let his loneliness control him. There are times when it's too much for him to keep in, but he still pushes forward. He helps me move forward. Soon the tears start to fall. He holds me and makes me feel safe. I felt protected in his arm. He helps me and I love him for it. Love, Isane said with shock. She thought it was an extreme like, but love was not what she was expecting. Yes, I love him, Nemu said, wiping away her tears. He makes me whole. Isane looked at Nemu and pulls her into a hug. I'm so happy for you, she said. Thank you, Nemu said back. I just glad you're happy, Isane said, but leaned in close. But what about when we have to go back to the Soul Society? Nemu got up and headed towards the kitchen. Before she opened the door, she turned around and smiled. Simple, she said, I am not going back. SB. Orihime went up the ladder to the main store after she had finished healing Ururu and Junta. As she entered the main area, she was surprised to find all her friends there talking with Urahara. Hi everyone, what are you doing here? She asked. We came because we are worried about you, Uru said. You haven't been yourself that last couple of weeks. What do you mean? She said as she sat down. Ichigo looked at her and put his hand behind her head. We were worried you were in trouble. I fine, as you can see, Orihime stated. She looked at them and could see the look of worry in their eyes. She knew they all cared for her, but she could take care of herself. Also, Urahara has been telling us about this project you've been helping out with. Uryu said. Are you sure it's safe for you to go? Orihime looked at Uryu. He looked at her as if she was helpless. No, I think I'll be fine, I've been training, she said, letting a little anger into her voice. Well, from what we heard about this world, it seemed really dangerous. Uryu said. I just think it'd be better for you to stay behind and let someone else go. I have been training and Urahara say I am ready. Orihime replied. She has come a long way. Urahara said. She will be fine. Why not have either Chad or I go with them? Uryu said. Yeah, this sounds like a great idea, Ichigo said with a smile, causing Orihime to frown. She looked at the three males and knew that they thought she was nothing but a damsel in distress. I don't need your protection, she screamed at them. The three looked at her in shock. She never got mad. I so tired of being treated like I'm nothing but someone to save. She spat and exited the room, tears streaming down her face. She hated this feeling. She hated being mad, but she couldn't keep quiet anymore. They had saved her countless of times and she had nothing. I will show them, she vowed and headed back down to the training area, determined to be strong enough to finally be the one doing the saving. SB. Naruto, Nemu, and Isane all stood outside. It had been 3 days since Isane had found out about Naruto and Nemu. She was still in shock that Nemu wasn't going to go back to the Soul Society, but didn't let it affect her training. Naruto had pushed them hard and they had learned all 3 basic academy justice. Isane was very happy with her progress and smiled as she watched Naruto instruct Nemu in the correct hand signs for the just you he was teaching her. They had found out their nature affinities a few days ago and he was teaching them each AC ranked just you for their respective affinities. Nemu was Earth, so he was teaching her Doden, Earth Wall Justu. Isane watched as a small wall of earth came from the ground. It wasn't tall, but it was thick. Good job, Naruto said to Nemu. Most people can't even make a wall on their first try. Thank you, Nemu said with a smile. I had a really good teacher. I'm glad I can be of help, Naruto said and smiled. Now I want you to practice this while I go teach Isane her just you. Nemu nodded and Naruto started to walk over towards Isane. Isane noticed this and waited for him to arrive in front of her. Okay, let get you started, he said and walked towards the lake. We need water for this, so come on. Isane nodded and followed. She watched the blonde and couldn't help but see the same traits that Nemu had described to her. He was a good person. He was helpful and never harmful unless it was to an enemy. He always had a smile on his face. She also noticed that he was always making sure that they were happy. Isane blushed at this as she remembered their first meeting. Instead of leering at her, he put his coat over her and made sure she was okay. As she watched him, her heart started to beat faster. What is this feeling? She asked herself as they stopped by the lake. Do I have feeling for him? I can't. He is with Nemu, but he is such a good person. No, I can't do that, she said to herself and looked at the blonde. Naruto smiled at her. Okay, today we are going to learn Sweden. Water bullet. This is a C rank just you that allows you to create a large ball of water and shoot it at your opponent at high speeds, he said. Isane nodded and Naruto continued show her the hand signs slowly so she could copy them. She went through the hand signs a few times before she was ready to try it for herself. Okay, I'm ready, she said. She went through the hand signs. Sweden. Water bullet. A little drop of water came up, but it soon fell down back into the water. Sweden. Water bullet, she cried, but yet again only a small drop came from the water. She kept on trying, but it always ended in the same way. Why can't I get this? She said and sat down on the ground in frustration. Naruto sat down next to her and gave her a comforting smile. It's okay, you can't expect to get it in the first try, he said. I know, it just frustrating that it keeps dropping back into the water, she said. You are doing great, Naruto said, trying to comfort her. Most people can't even get that much on their first try. You're just saying that to make me feel better, Isane said as she looked down on the ground. Stand up, Naruto said and stood up. Isane looked up at him and did what he said. Turn around. Isane did as she was told and waited for his next order. Now form the hand signs again, but slower. Isane nodded and started to do the hand signs when suddenly she felt Naruto press himself against her back. He wrapped his arms around her and put his hand on hers. He followed her hands as she went through the hand signs. Isane felt her heart race. She was having a hard time concentrating on what she was doing with Naruto so close to her. Your finger is wrong, he whispered in her ear as he stopped her on the third hand sign. You need to straighten your finger. She nodded and did as he said. They went through the hand signs like this a few more times before Naruto was satisfied that she was able to get them down correctly. He moved away from her, making Isane sad with the lack of contact. He smiled at her. Now try it. Isane nodded and looked at the water. She closed her eyes and started to go through the hand signs. She could still feel Naruto against her skin as she continued the sequence. She finished the last sign. Sweden. Water bullet. She shouted. A tennis ball size water ball flew into the air and shot across the lake, crashing into a tree. Isane heard clapping. She turned and saw that it was Naruto. Good job, he said. She smiled and hugged him. Thank you, she said. Naruto hugged her back. No problem, he said and broke the hug. Just keep practicing and you have it down in no time. Isane nodded and Naruto left her to practice. Isane watched him disappear, felt sad. She knew that she had fallen for him. She sat down on the ground as tears began to flow. It had just happened and she didn't know what to do. Nemu was in love with Naruto and he was in love with her. She couldn't get in the way of that. What should I do? She asked herself as her tears ran down her face. All the while Nemu watched from the tree line. Later at the house, Isane sat on her bed wondering what she should do. She knew that she was in love with Naruto, but she didn't want to betray Nemu. She wanted her to be happy, but she couldn't deny her feelings. Why is this happening? She asked herself. While she had her internal debate, she failed to notice Nemu enter the room. Nemu looked at Isane and knew that she as well was in love with the blonde. At first she was mad that Isane wanted him, but then she could see that he was a guy any girl would love to have. She was scared at first, not knowing what to do. Should she let Isane have him or keep him for herself? As she thought about it, a scroll had come to the house. Nemu had picked it up and read it. It seemed that Naruto was supposed to marry at least 4 women by his 21st birthday to restart his clan. If he didn't choose his brides before then, they would be chosen for him. She reread the scroll and headed towards Naruto's room. She walked in the room and looked at the blonde laying on the bed. Naruto, she said, getting his attention. Yes, he said, and saw her holding the scroll. This was delivered a few minutes ago. Nemu started, is it true you have to marry at least 4 women by your next birthday? Naruto turned to her and gave her and sighed, yes. He said, here, if you are the last of your clan and have a bloodline, then you are regicider under the CRA. This stands for Clan Restoration Act, which states that the last of a clan must take multiple wives to bring the clan back to life. But you don't have a bloodline, do you? She asked. Well, yes and no. Naruto said and patted for her to sit next to him. I don't have a bloodline like others. My bloodline allows us to be the jailer for Biju. Since I am the last of my family, they need my children to hold the Kyuubi once I am gone. But, Nemu started to say after she had heard of his childhood as a Jinchuriki. It's fine, he said and gave her a smile. I will prepare them for when that time comes. I don't plan on dying anytime soon. I will make sure no one treats them like they treated me. Nemu leaned on him and smiled, knowing he wouldn't allow anything to happen. So if you had someone else who loved you, you would be with them. If they truly love me and I love them, then I am more than willing, he said. This brought Nemu to her current predicament. She looked at Isane and knew that she truly cared for Naruto. She didn't want to share him, but they had no choice, so she would rather share him with Isane, the stranger. She sat down next to her friend. Isane, Nemu said, can I ask you something? Yes, what is it? Isane said, wondering what was on Nemu's mind. Do you have feelings for Naruto? Nemu asked. Isane was caught off guard by this and started to stutter. No, I don't. You're lying. Nemu said. I'm not. Isane said, looking away, not wanting to look Nemu in the eye. Please tell me, Nemu pleaded. Isane started to cry as she turned to look at Nemu. Yes, she said. Nemu wrapped her arms around her friend and held her. I don't know how it happened, she cried. I thought it was nothing, but I love him. Nemu looked at her and smiled. Then you can be with him, she said. What? Isane replied. I can't you with him. Nemu smiled. There is a way, she said, and proceeded to explain the CRA. But what if he rejects me? Isane said as her fear started to take over. Nemu looked at Isane with comforting eyes. He won't. Are you sure? She asked. Nemu just smiled and nodded. Isane looked at her and smiled back. Now come on, Nemu said, getting up. What, wait, she said, but Nemu pulled her down the hall and towards Naruto's room. Go on, Nemu said, but Isane started to back up. Nemu wouldn't have any of it. She opened the door and pushed Isane inside. Before Isane could react, the door was closed and the sound of a key turning filled the air. Isane turned and saw Naruto sleeping on the bed. He looked so peaceful as he slept. She stayed by the door and didn't move, but soon Naruto began to stir. He slowly got out of bed and noticed Isane standing by the door. Hey Isane, he said as he yawned. Hello Nato, Isane stuttered. Is there something the matter? He asked as he got up. Her face turned bright red as he walked towards her. You're not sick, are you? Your face is all red. Isane's heart was beating out of her chest. She couldn't deny her feeling any longer and she let her heart take over. She leaned in and captured his lips. Naruto is shocked and stood frozen. Isane soon comes to her senses and backed away from him. I'm so sorry, she said as tears started to come down her face. Naruto comes to his senses and looked at Isane in tears. He walked over to her and pulled her close. It's okay, he said, I was just surprised. But, She stammered and looks at him. No buts. Naruto said. He pulled her close. Do you really feel that way? Isane nodded and Naruto pulled her into a kiss. She is surprised but soon was kissing him back. Naruto held her close and Isane felt happy. SB. Orihime sat in the secret training ground, tears streaming down her face. She hated being sad and feeling helpless. I'm not helpless, she said to herself as she tried to wipe away her tears. I can help. As she cried, she failed to notice Naneo walking towards her. She sat down next to the crying girl. It's okay, Naneo said, trying to comfort Orihime. They don't think I can do anything without protection. Orihime cried. They just worried about you. Naneo said. They just want you to be safe. I know, but I can help, Orihime replied. I'm not helpless. Then prove them wrong. Naneo said. Show them you don't need help. Orihime nodded and dried her tears. Thanks, Naneo, she said and got up. Anytime. Naneo replied. Now come on, Mayuri is almost done with the portal, we are heading to the Soul Society soon. Okay, let's go. Orihime said and followed Naneo towards the open Senkinman. SB. Naruto woke up the next day with a yawn. He looked to his side and saw Nemu sleeping beside him. He smiled and turned around to see Isane on his other side. After the kiss, they had all gotten together and discussed what would happen next. They all decided that it was in their best interest to share. He loved them both and planned on making both happy. Isane was happy that she was with him but was a little scared when the Soul Society looks for them. She would miss Captain Unohana, but she was happy with Naruto and that was all that mattered. This is going to be a great day, Naruto said as he laid his head down on his pillow. Yes, it will, Nemu said, surprising the blonde. This made him jump and wake Isane. Keep it down, she said as she wiped the sleep from her eyes. Sorry, Haim, Naruto said and gave her a light kiss. Didn't mean to wake you. Isane smiled and pulled him into passionate kiss. She pulled away and said, it's fine. He smiled before he was pulled into another kiss, but it was with Nemu. They broke it after a few moments and Naruto had a large smile on his face. I am the luckiest guy in the world, he said as he pulled both girl close to him. Yes, you are, Nemu said as she snuggled into him. I second that, Isane said. Naruto smiled. So what should we do today? He asked. Nemu and Isane looked at each other and smiled. It's time for you to start training, Nemu said. Naruto smiled and got out of bed. He picked up both girls and lifted them out of bed. Let's get going, he said, making them both laugh as he walked towards the door. This is going to be fun, Isane said.